As soon as Chen Haoyan's voice resounded, both Xianyuan Tong and Zhuoqiu Xing instantly shut their mouths. The other old figures seated in the hall understood completely in their hearts. They were very well aware that there was old enmity between Xianyuan Tong and Zhuoqiu Xing. In all these years of the past until now, conflict had erupted between them on many occasions. Because the Xianyuan clan and Zhuoqiu clan stood behind them respectively, it caused the relationship between these two clans to be rather tense, and they faintly showed signs of turning hostile against each other. Fortunately, this was Dao Emperor Academy, and there were many seniors holding down the fort here, otherwise the Pill Reserve would probably be unable to accommodate the two of them. Since the matter has come to this, what does Brother Chun think our next move should be? Said Mo Linghai. Chen Haoyan frowned and pondered deeply for a long time before he said, "Never mind. It's already too late to rescind the assignment now. The important matter at hand is to find a way to repair the 9 profundity treasured cauldron as soon as possible." Xianyuan Tong said, "My cousin brother, Xianyuan Pajuan, has already returned to the clan. Perhaps it won't be long before he'll be able to invite some Supreme Talisman Formation Grandmasters over to repair the cauldron along with us." Chen Haoyan shook his head and said, "I'm afraid that it won't work. There are many Supreme Talisman Formation Grandmasters amongst us here, yet aren't we helpless towards restoring the 9 profundity treasured cauldron?" When he spoke up to hear, he walked forward to stand before the cauldron and stared at it. He said, "The key to the problem is the talisman formation diagram within the cauldron." The others shot their gazes towards the cauldron when they heard this, and they rather agreed with Chen Haoyan's opinion. Indeed, the 9 profundity treasured cauldron was personally created by the primeval Dao Emperor, and the talisman formation diagrams within it were mysterious, complicated, and extremely rare. Even though they were Supreme Talisman Formation Grandmasters, yet none of them had seen such talisman formation diagrams in their lives. They'd studied it bitterly and tried to break down the profundities within it and deduce them. However, they came up empty-handed in the end. If it wasn't for that, they wouldn't have become anxious to such an extent in these past few days. Actually, I suspect that only that mysterious sect is able to recognize the talisman formation diagrams within the cauldron. Mo Lanhai seemed to have thought of something, and a wisp of a strange expression suffused his face. But in the end, he didn't speak that name, and he used the words mysterious sect as a replacement instead. But the others seemed to have understood something when they heard this, and they revealed strange expressions as well. It seemed to be expressions of respect and wonder. "Master!" Right at this moment, a respectful voice sounded out abruptly from outside the hall. Everyone moved their gazes and saw a black-clothed young man standing outside the hall. He had a dignified and upright bearing, and all of them recognized him as the disciple that cultivated in the Tao of Pills by Chen Haoyan's side, Ling Su. "What is it?" Chen Haoyan frowned. Ling Su said hurriedly, "News that caused quite a big commotion came from the assignment mountain just moments ago, and I felt that it was necessary to be reported to Master." As he spoke, he gave an account of everything that had occurred earlier. Chan Shi, a Supreme Talisman Formation Grandmaster? He completed 90 assignments in the Tao of Talismans within 12 hours? All of those assignments were at an outstanding level of completion or above? When they finished listening to all of this, all the seniors within the hall weren't able to maintain their calm any longer, and all of them exclaimed with shock and were slightly surprised. "Is this true?" Xianyuan Tong stood up and asked in a slightly excited manner. "It is. I personally verified it before coming here. However, I'm unable to determine Chan Shi's identity." As he finished speaking, Ling Su was slightly hesitant. Meanwhile, all the others in the hall came to a sudden understanding. Right, is there even a Supreme Talisman Formation Grandmaster in the entire academy called Chan Shi? There's no need to continue guessing. If this matter is true, then it's definitely the first amongst the new students that were just recruited into the academy. Chun Shi. Chen Haoyan spoke while a wisp of a strange expression slipped past his eyes. The first amongst the new students? All the others instantly came to an understanding. They were naturally clearly aware who the first amongst the new students this year was, because since the ancient times until now, besides Yun Fuxing whose whereabouts were unknown, only Xianxia had obtained a praise of the gods that exceeded the level of resonance of the heavens and the earth. The reason they hadn't thought of him earlier was that Xianxia was only at the intermediate stage of the mysterious immortal realm, and they were truly unable to link him together with a supreme talisman formation grandmaster. Even if it was this moment, they still felt slight doubt. Especially Wuxia Shang, his expression froze slightly when he heard the words Chan Shi, and then the corners of his mouth couldn't help but curl into an imperceptible arc. He seemed to be revealing ridicule and disdain, yet it also seemed like hatred and contempt. But in next to no time, his expression recovered its calm, and he said, "Even if this Chan Shi is a supreme talisman formation grandmaster, so what about it? Could it be that all of you think a young man at the intermediate stage of the mysterious immortal realm like him is capable of restoring the 9 profundity treasured cauldron?" As soon as these words were spoken, many of the others went silent. Just think about it, even many of the supreme talisman formation grandmasters of the academy were helpless, so how could a young man possibly be able to accomplish it? No matter what, since Xianxia was able to accomplish this at such a young age, then he surely possesses unique attainments in the Tao of Talismans. I'll go look for him right now. If he's able to solve this problem, then no matter what sort of price I have to pay, Xianxia won't even frown at it. Xianxia suddenly stood up and intended to leave the hall as he spoke. All the others shook their heads and sighed lightly when they saw this. How could they be unable to perceive that Xianxia was like someone who was critically ill and was willing to turn to any doctor he could find? Obviously, he was a bit too impatient. "Wait!" Chen Haoyan stopped Xianxia. "Since the assignment has already been issued, then that little fellow has definitely seen it. If he's able to solve it, then how could he remain indifferent? The reward for that assignment is an entire 800,000 star points. Any new student would probably be unable to resist such temptation." Xianxia was stunned, and then his expression instantly dimmed down greatly as he sighed. "Then, what exactly should we do? Could it be that we should just continue waiting?" His voice revealed a wisp of dejection. The damage suffered by the 9 profundity treasured cauldron was related to Xianxuan's cousin brother, Xianxuan, so he naturally couldn't sit idly by and remain indifferent. It was precisely because he was concerned about this matter that he seemed to be slightly anxious and worried. "Never mind. I have to try no matter what. Even if the hope of success is extremely tiny, it's still better than having no hope at all." Xianxuan muttered as he walked out of the hall, and he seemed as if he'd been possessed. The others let out another wave of sighs when they saw this. Only Wuxia Shang's eyes had a wisp of ridicule that flashed through its depths. "You're dreaming of restoring the cauldron with that kid's little ability? Alright, if you, Xianxuan, are able to drag him down as well, then so long as he fails, I'll have an opportunity to teach him a good lesson as well. The first amongst the new students is a supreme talisman formation grandmaster?" "Exactly. Amongst all the instructors and students in the entire academy, only he's named Chan Shi. So besides him, who else could have been the madman that swept through 90 assignments in the Tao of Talismans within 12 hours? My God! How extraordinary! I remember that he's only at the intermediate stage of the mysterious immortal realm, right? Oh, I should make friends with him if I have the chance. Such a young supreme talisman formation grandmaster is rarely seen." On this day, a piece of news was spread from Assignment Mountain, and it spread throughout the entirety of Tao Emperor Academy as if it had grown wings, whereas Chun Shi's name gradually appeared within the topics of discussion of numerous students and instructors. No one had expected that the first amongst the new students this year would actually be so formidable. He was only at the intermediate stage of the mysterious immortal realm in Cultivation, yet he'd obtained a praise of the gods that exceeded the level of the resonance of the heavens and the earth, and he himself was even a supreme talisman formation grandmaster. All of this was so dazzling, and it was impossible for others to overlook. Vast Cloud Mountain, Lucky Rain Peak. Swoosh! A beautiful figure tore through the sky and arrived her. Her clear eyes swept the surroundings before it descended onto the abode on the peak. And then she formed a cone with her hands before she cried out in a clear voice. "Hey, are you here? Are you here? Are you?" Her airy voice reverberated through the mountain. Within the abode, Qian Shi, who was in meditation, opened his eyes while a wisp of helplessness suffused the corners of his mouth. He didn't have to guess to know that it was Axiu that had come looking for him, because only Axiu would address him with the word, "Hey." In the next moment, he stood up and walked out of the abode. A wisp of delight appeared on Axiu's clear and pure face when she saw Qian Shi's tall figure emerge, and she leaped over to Qian Shi's side before she pulled on his sleeve and chuckled. "Supreme Talisman Formation Grandmaster, I have something I need to trouble you with. I wonder if you can help me." Qian Shi was stunned. "Supreme Talisman Formation Grandmaster?" Axiu nodded solemnly and said, "Yes. Presently, the entire academy knows that you're a Supreme Talisman Formation Grandmaster and a madman that madly swept through 90 assignments in the Tao of Talismans within 12 hours. Qian Shi was astounded, and then he came to an understanding. "I seem to have accepted and completed numerous assignments earlier. However, I don't remember how long I spent to complete them or how many I completed." When he thought up to here, his immortal sense entered the violet ribbon starcrest. Surprisingly, he noticed that the star points he possessed had already risen to a number of 168,000. No matter how calm Qian Shi was, his heart couldn't help but thump fiercely at this moment. After all, after he paid the fee of 1,000 star points to verify his identity at Assignment Mountain yesterday, only a total of 8,000 star points remained in his possession. Yet 1 day later, he had an additional 160,000 star points. After that, Qian Shi noticed that there was some information similar to a statement within his violet ribbon star crest, and it clearly labeled the source and details of these star points. Afterwards, the corners of Qian Shi's mouth twitched because he noticed that he should have obtained around 200,000 star points. But in the end, the academy had forcefully deducted almost 20% in administration fees. Over 40,000 star points were deducted. The academy is truly ruthless. Qian Shi's expression became slightly strange. "What's wrong?" Axiu looked at Qian Shi with a curious expression. "It's nothing." Qian Shi returned to his senses and asked, "Right, what exactly do you need my help with?" Axiu seemed to be slightly embarrassed when this was mentioned, yet she was unable to restrain herself in the end and said, "My third uncle, Xianxia, came looking for me earlier. He said that he wants to trouble you to help restore the damaged talisman formation diagram of a treasure." As she spoke, Axiu spoke in detail about everything related to the matter of the 9 profundity treasured cauldron. During this entire process, Qian Shi suddenly recalled that he seemed to have seen this assignment, and it seemed to require a Supreme Talisman Formation Grandmaster to accept it. Moreover, the reward of the assignment was 800,000 star points. Sure enough, in the next moment, Axiu said hatefully, "It was all done by that Wuxia Shang. He spread the news of this by way of issuing an assignment. Otherwise, my third uncle wouldn't be in such a passive position." "Wuxia Shang?" Qian Shi's brows raised. "The Wuxia clan again?" Hill Reserve. Within the great hall where the 9 profundity treasured cauldron stood. "Xianxia Pajuan?" He returned so quickly? "Oh, there are also some Supreme Talisman Formation Grandmasters from the Xianxia clan." All the seniors here discussed. Before the 9 profundity treasured cauldron, Xianxia Pajuan was silent while he stared fixedly at it. Near him was a few Supreme Talisman Formation Grandmasters, and they were studying the talisman formation diagrams within the cauldron with concentration. These Supreme Talisman Formation Grandmasters had been brought over by Xianxia Pajuan from his clan, and they'd come with a single objective, to try their best to restore the cauldron. The Pill Reserve's Dean, Chen Haoyan, the Vice Dean Mo Linghai, and all the other seniors of the academy didn't disturb them because all of these figures were able to discern that Xianxia Pajuan was filled with anxiety and worry. After a short period of time, a Supreme Talisman Formation Grandmaster shook his head and sighed. "How is it?" asked Xianxia Pajuan. He had a towering figure, brows that were shaped like bolts of lightning, and he was like an unrivaled god as he stood there casually. "I don't have the slightest idea." The Supreme Talisman Formation Grandmaster spoke bitterly. Xianxia Pajuan's dense brows knit together before he waved his hand and said, "Continue deducing. If all 8 of you Supreme Talisman Formation Grandmasters can't even deal with a damaged talisman formation diagram, then it would simply be an embarrassment. He didn't hold back in the slightest. This was Xianxia Pujuan. His disposition was sharp like a sword, violent like a blade, and since he cultivated until now, he'd always been famous for being courageous, fearless, and straightforward. It was precisely because of this disposition that many people called him Madman Xianxia. Time flowed by bit, and the atmosphere within the hall grew even more heavy and oppressive. Along with the passage of time, the expressions of these supreme talisman formation grandmasters from the Xianxia clan become heavier and heavier while their brows knit together tightly. They seemed to have encountered a problem that they were unable to figure out no matter how they racked their brains. One could faintly notice bewilderment, frustration, surprise, vexation, and so on and so forth on their faces. It was naturally impossible for Xianxia Pujuan to not notice all of this, causing his mood to become even more anxious as well, and there was a wisp of rage condensing faintly between his brows. Fellow Taoist Pujuan, I think we should think of another way. Chun Haotian spoke in a low voice. He was slightly worried that if this were to continue, then this madman, Xianxia Pujuan, might lose his temper. There's no need for that. This matter arose because of me, so it should naturally end because of me as well. If these clansmen of mine are unable to deal with it, then if worse comes to worse, I'll admit my mistakes to the dean. Xianxia Pujuan waved his hand as he spoke resolutely. Humph! Even all the supreme talisman formation grandmasters of my pill reserve are helpless against this. I think you can just forget it and stop making unnecessary effort. A cold grunt resounded abruptly, and it seemed to be rather jarring to the ear. Xianxia Pujuan turned around and saw Wuxia laughing coldly at him. This caused his brows to suddenly raise, and then a wisp of cold light that was like the cold glow of a blade suddenly arose from his gaze. At this instant, a strand of terrifying killing intent suddenly effused out and threw the flow of qi and space into chaos. It caused everyone to feel as if they were about to be dragged down into a bottomless abyss. Everyone was horrified, especially Wuxia. His fair and fat face suddenly twitched and lost all its color while his figure staggered, causing him to almost fall to the ground. Chun Haotian's heart jerked when he saw this, and he immediately said loudly, "Fellow Taoist Pujuan, calm your rage. Humph! Even if I, Xianxia Pujuan, were to suffer a calamity right now, there's no place for a damnable fatty like you to interfere." Xianxia Pujuan grunted coldly before he withdrew his gaze, and the strand of terrifying killing intent was withdrawn into his body like tidewater as he recovered his calm. Wuxia was both terrified and furious, and he gritted his teeth while he sneered in his heart. "Madman Xianxia, I'll let you run wild for now. Let me see how you give the dean an explanation once you're unable to restore the cauldron. You even vainly attempted to refine a divining Dao transformation pill. That's a prohibited pill. It was prohibited by the dean himself. Cousin brother? You've returned so soon." Meanwhile, someone walked in from outside the hall. He wore violet clothes and had a dignified expression. He was Xianxia Tong. He was surprised and delighted when he saw Xianxia Pujuan. "Where did you go? It has already come to this, yet you left this hall." Xianxia Pujuan frowned instead. He was rather worried in his heart, so he spoke even more bluntly. Xianxia Tong laughed bitterly. He really understood Xianxia Pujuan's mood, so he wasn't offended by this. "Third ancestral uncle went to look for me, and I went to look for Chan Shi." A clear and melodious voice resounded from outside the hall. Accompanying this voice was Axiu's graceful and lively figure that appeared within everyone's fields of vision. "Axiu." Xianxia Pujuan was stunned, and he said with a frown, "What did you come here for, little girl?" Even though he spoke like this, his voice had eased up greatly. Obviously, he rather doted upon this junior of his. Axiu had her hands behind her back while she walked into the hall with a grin on her face. She didn't feel anything was wrong at all with a junior like her making an appearance before so many seniors of the academy. She said when she arrived near the cauldron, "Second ancestral uncle, I naturally came to restore the cauldron. If you're unwilling, then I'll leave right away. Stop playing around." Xianxia Pujuan berated her without the slightest thought when he heard this. The other seniors couldn't stop themselves from chuckling and smiling without end as well. Then I'll really leave? Axiu blinked and smiled as she looked at Xianyuan Pujuan. Xianyuan Pujuan was angry and was just about to wave his hand to make her leave immediately when Xianyuan Tong stopped him. Cousin brother, listen to what Axiu has to say first. When they saw Xianyuan Tong actually spoke on behalf of Axiu, it wasn't just Xianyuan Pujuan who was stunned. Even the other seniors restrained their smiles as they realized Axiu didn't seem like she was joking. Only Zhuoqiu Shang laughed coldly without end. Obviously, he was rather disapproving towards this. Chun Shi will come over 10 days from now, and he'll help us restore the 9 profundity treasured cauldron. Axiu didn't beat around the bush, and she casually spoke these words before turning around and leaving the hall. Her clear and melodious voice was still reverberating through the hall while the expressions of everyone within the hall had become strange. 10 days from now? Restore the cauldron? Where did that kid get such confidence? Xianyuan Pujuan frowned and said to Xianyuan Tong via voice transmission, "Has Axiu gone mad?" She spoke too confidently. What if he fails? It wouldn't just be that kid who loses face at that time. Xianyuan Tong shrugged and said helplessly, "It has already come to this, so let's just give it a try." Xianyuan Pujuan shook his head and didn't speak any further. The world of stars. After he agreed to Axiu that he would try to help, Chun Shi directly entered the world of stars. He withdrew the violet ribbon starcrest and entered the assignment area before finding the assignment related to the restoration of the 9 profundity treasured cauldron. After that, he started to study it with concentration. This assignment was very difficult, otherwise, it would be impossible for all the seniors in the Pill Reserve to be helpless against it. So, Chun Shi didn't dare strike his chest and guarantee he would really be able to deal with it perfectly. What he could do was try his best. No matter if it was to help Axiu or earn the 800,000 star points of the assignment, he would do all he could. Of course, Chun Shi didn't know that Axiu had already spread the news that he would definitely be able to deal with the restoration of the cauldron in 10 days of time. 10 days in the outside world was equivalent to 50 days in the world of stars. Chun Shi concentrated on the assignment and was completely unaware of the passage of time. Unknowingly, over a month had already passed within the world of stars. I can confirm that it's related to divine talismans, yet it's even more obscure and complicated. Those that possess such ability have probably exceeded the standard of a supreme talisman formation grandmaster and can be called a talisman god. Chun Shi muttered. Presently, he was clearly aware that above the levels of Talisman Formation Grandmaster and Supreme Talisman Formation Grandmaster was the levels of Talisman God and Talisman Saint. First God, then Saint. As the saying goes, gods and saints are inviolable. It was obvious from this method of address that Talisman Gods and Talisman Saints were extraordinarily lofty existences. On the other hand, the word inviolable vividly described their status. Actually, the Tao of talismans followed the same principles as the Sword Tao, Blade Tao, Art Tao, Scholarly Tao. For example, when an expert in the Sword Tao attained an enlightened sword heart, it would be the level of Grandmaster in the Sword Tao, while a myriad of techniques emerging from a single sword technique was the Supreme Grandmaster level in the Sword Tao, whereas above the Grandmaster and Supreme Grandmaster levels were the existences like Sword Gods and Sword Saints. However, because the experts that were addressed as God or Saint were too few in number within the 3 dimensions, the knowledge related to this sort of levels were extremely scarce within the 3 dimensions. Could only be described as unfathomable, supreme, and mysterious. Looks like I can only rely on the might of the infinite divine talisman. After pondering for a long time, Chun Shi finally decided to stop wasting time unnecessarily. If he had even more time, then he would naturally study the talisman formation diagrams of the cauldron with all his heart and soul. But unfortunately, he had too many things to deal with now, and he didn't have enough time at all. So he naturally couldn't waste all his time on this. On the other hand, the only thing Chun Shi felt was capable of dealing with this problem was probably the true inheritance of the master of the manor, the infinite divine talisman. Right at this moment, a grand and strange fluctuation suddenly spread out from the world of stars with shocking impetus. Chun Shi was stunned. When he turned around, he saw that at this moment, His main bodies that was seated cross-legged in meditation, there had suddenly emanated a myriad of strands of divine brilliance and caused a rain of light to descend. Its entire imposing aura was like a bamboo shoot after the rain, and it suddenly rose swiftly. My main body has advanced into the advanced stage of the mysterious immortal realm. Xianxia's eyes lit up. His clone and main body were two parts of a whole, so he was naturally able to clearly sense the various shocking changes in his main body at this moment. Beneath his main body's dantian and within the Huyin acupoint, a torrent of immortal force had shockingly converged there at this moment, and it emanated divine brilliance that was like amber. The vitality soul. At this moment, his heavenly soul, earthly soul, and vitality soul had been linked completely, causing the cerebral palace at the top of Xianxia's head, the Tanzhong acupoint at his chest, and the Huyin acupoint beneath his stomach to form a straight line that was linked together and fused together. It revealed the profound scene of the three souls fused together and profound vitality emerging. Once this realm was attained, the entire body would be without the slightest shred of dirt. Thus, one's body had truly formed into a Tao constitution. All of these were the signs of the advanced stage of the mysterious immortal realm. Not bad. If I'm able to deal with the restoration of the 9 profundity treasured cauldron, then I can allow my main body to act. In this way, my clone wouldn't be exposed, and it continue playing the role of a trump card. Xianxia took a deep breath and stopped thinking about this anymore before turning around and heading towards the depths of the starry sky. 10 days later, the Pill Reserve. Before the 9 profundity treasured cauldron at the center of the hall, the figure of a supreme talisman formation grandmaster from the Xianyuan clan stiffened before he spat out a mouthful of blood and fell weakly to the ground. Clamorous noise erupted and everyone was surprised and anxious. Xianyuan Pajuan's brows knit together tightly as he walked forward to check the supreme talisman formation grandmaster's injuries before he heaved a sigh of relief in his heart and said, "His mental strength was exhausted too much. He'll be fine." Even though he spoke like this, his expression was extremely gloomy. During these past 10 days, these supreme talisman formation grandmasters from the Xianyuan clan had been studying the talisman formation diagram within the cauldron. Yet they'd come up empty-handed and there was no development in the matter at all. Now, these supreme talisman formation grandmasters were covered in exhausted expressions while their eyes were bloodshot, and their mental strength was already completely exhausted. Under such circumstances, it was naturally impossible for Xianyuan Pajuan to be in a good mood. Fellow Taoist Pajuan, please ask them to stop. If this continues, then it'll be very easy for them to suffer backlash and damage the foundation of their cultivations. The Pill Reserve's Dean, Chun Haoyan, spoke in a low voice. These were supreme talisman formation grandmasters, and every single one of them were existences that were respected by countless living beings if they were in the outside world. Now, they were ordered about like mules instead by Xianyuan Pajuan, and Chen Haoyan couldn't bear to continue watching this happen. The other seniors of the Pill Reserve nodded successively and deeply agreed. If the foundations of a group of supreme talisman formation grandmasters were damaged because of the 9 profundity treasured cauldron, then the detriment would absolutely outweigh the benefits. Cousin brother, why not allow them to rest for now? Didn't Axiu say that Xianxia would come today? Perhaps that young man will be able to give us a pleasant surprise. Xianyuan Tong couldn't help but persuade Xianyuan Pajuan. Can what Axiu said be trusted? Xianyuan Pajuan disapproved. I've met that kid, Xianxia. If you say that his natural talent in the path towards the Tao is unparalleled, then I'd absolutely not doubt it in the slightest. Otherwise, it would be impossible for me to personally take the initiative to go over with the intention of taking him as my disciple after the test ended that day. He paused for a moment and continued. But if you tell me that a little fellow at the intermediate stage of the mysterious immortal realm like him is capable of solving a problem that all of us old geezers are unable to solve, then I'm slightly doubtful. Xianyuan Pajuan's words were within reason, and all the seniors within the hall thought like that as well. In other words, practically all of them held doubtful attitudes towards Xianxia's ability to restore the cauldron. Xianyuan Tong couldn't help but sigh when he heard this. Cousin brother, then what should we do? Xianyuan Pajuan's brows knit together tightly, and he went silent while pondering deeply. Yes, at this point in time, even he didn't know what to do. Unless the Academy's senior Buping, who possessed the title Talisman God, returned, but obviously that was impossible. Thump! Right at this moment, the entrance to the hall was pushed open from the outside. A piercingly cold, solemn, and deathly silent aura suddenly surged in from the outside, and it caused the hearts of all the seniors here to tremble while their gazes shot over. A group of around 10 black-robed figures stepped into the hall under Zhuoqiushang's lead. Along with their arrival, the air in the entire hall seemed to be effused with an bone-piercing, icy cold, and murderous aura that was deathly silent. It felt as if a group of death gods had arrived from hell. They were merciless, cold, and intended to reap the souls of the dead, causing a wisp of coldness to uncontrollably arise in the hearts of all. Everyone present here was a top great figure and senior of the Academy, yet their pupils constricted while their entire bodies felt uncomfortable when they saw this group of black-robed figures. It wasn't that they were afraid, and it was a sort of feeling of detest. It was like they saw the arrival of a group of plague gods. Enforcers! What are they doing here? Everyone within the hall frowned in unison. The Dean of the Pill Reserve, Chen Haoyan, even stood up while his gaze shot over coldly like a bolt of lightning, and he didn't conceal his detest at all. Enforcers were a group of special experts in the Academy. Every single one of them at least possessed a cultivation at the Saint Immortal realm and had terrifying combat strengths. Their existence was alike to the Enforcement Hall, and it was for the sake of upholding the rules of the Academy. The only difference was that the Enforcement Hall was formed from students, and they supervised matters related to students, whereas enforcers existed to supervise the instructors in the Academy. This sort of people were like the executioners of the mortal world. They were cold, ruthless, and had hands covered in blood. They were the most merciless and cruel sort of people, so there was naturally no one that had a good impression of them. Zhuoqiushang, why did you bring enforcers to the Pill Reserve? Xianxia Tong questioned with a grim voice. Oh, I encountered fellow Taoist Li Bei by chance. They're looking for fellow Taoist Pujuan, so I brought them along with me. Zhuoqiushang spoke frankly. As soon as he finished speaking, he grinned to a black-robed man by his side and said, Fellow Taoist Li Bei, I've completed my assignment. Please do as you please. The black-robed man called Li Bei had a thin figure and stood upright like a spear. His face that seemed as if it was carved by a blade revealed a strange wisp of paleness, and his entire disposition was firm, cold, and murderous. He was Li Bei, one of the head enforcers, and he was at the half-step Immortal King realm. During the years that he was in the Academy, he'd slaughtered countless instructors that had betrayed the Academy, and he was a rather famous and terrifying figure amongst enforcers. Even if everyone here was clearly aware that the instructors who died at Li Bei's hands deserved such punishment because these instructors had either colluded with the Xenorace, were those of the evil sex, or had committed intolerable crimes, but everyone here couldn't arouse the slightest fondness towards Li Bei. Executioners were executioners, and there was little common ground for understanding between those that followed differing principles. When they saw Li Bei had brought enforcers over while Zhuoqiushang was at his side, how could everyone present not understand that all of this was aimed at Xianxia Pujuan? When they thought about how Xianxia Pujuan would fall into the hands of the enforcers in a moment, all the seniors present here sighed in their hearts and were furious. Moreover, they resented Zhuoqiushang for acting too mercilessly. There's no need to panic. We only came here because we received news that something happened to the 9 profundity treasured cauldron. This treasure has existed since the primeval times, and it's related to the karmic luck of the Pill Reserve. We received orders to come investigate here. Li Bei spoke with a low voice that carried a gloomy tone, and it was extremely frightening. I know that all of you don't like us enforcers, so please cooperate during our investigation. In this way, we can leave as soon as possible as well, so as to avoid arousing adverse feelings from all of you. Everyone grunted coldly and remained silent. Xianxia Pujuan seemed as if he didn't notice at all, and he stared at Li Bei emotionlessly as he said, Speak, did you come to capture me? Li Bei's expression became much more cautious when facing a head instructor of the inner court like Xianxia Pujuan, and he went silent for a short moment before he said, I didn't come to capture you, but to investigate. Xianxia Pujuan roared with laughter, and his voice shook the hall. What is there to investigate? The damage of just a treasure was able to make you enforcers take action. It looks to me that all of you are really too free. The expressions of those enforcers turned cold in unison when they heard this, and they revealed hostile gazes. Li Bei frowned and restrained his subordinates before he said to Xianxia Pujuan, I'm not worried about the cauldron, but the divining Dao transformation pills. Refining this pill requires the sacrifice of 1,000,000 souls to be transformed into the karmic luck of the heaven Dao for one's own use. It's something that only the evil sects do. I want to know where you got the 1,000,000 souls. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone in the hall fell into silence. Indeed, the divining Dao transformation pill is restricted because once it's refined, it'll definitely require the souls of 1,000,000 living beings as the main ingredient. Many of them present here were supreme grandmasters in the pill Dao within the pill reserve, so how could they be unaware of this? Xianxia Pujuan said coldly, I knew all of you would ask about this, but I have no fucking obligation to tell all of you. If I really have to explain, then I'll explain to the dean and not all of you. Fellow Taoist Pujuan, your attitude is... Xianxia spoke. Shut up. Who the fuck do you think you are to dare question my attitude? I'll kill you right now if you dare speak another word. Before Xianxia could finish speaking, Xianxia Pujuan had already waved his hand to interrupt Xianxia, and his voice was like a thunderclap as he scolded Xianxia to the point Xianxia's expression was livid and ashen. The others present here laughed bitterly and were surprised because they never expected that madman Xianxia would act so domineeringly at a time like this. So, in this way, fellow Taoist Xianxia doesn't intend to leave with us? Li Bei's expression turned even more indifferent. A wisp of combat intent surged faintly within the eyes of all the enforcers by his side, and their imposing aura erupted. As soon as these words were spoken, the atmosphere within the hall was tense to the extreme and would erupt into conflict at any moment. It crushed down upon everyone to the point they were unable to catch their breaths. Everyone was clearly aware that if Xianxia Pujuan were to leave with them, then the consequences Xianxia Pujuan faced wouldn't be anything far from terrible. But if he didn't go, then he couldn't avoid a battle, and the consequences would become even more severe. Only the corners of Xianxia's mouth were suffused with a wisp of faint ridicule. Now let me see what you, Xianxia Pujuan, will do. Xianxia Pujuan took a deep breath while he revealed a furious expression, and he glanced coldly at Li Bei and the others before glancing at Xianxia. In the end, he said in a low voice, Good, very good. All of you actually forced me into such a situation because of such a trivial matter. Since it's like this, then... He hadn't finished speaking when a voice suddenly sounded out from outside the hall. Seniors, can this matter be settled if I'm able to restore the cauldron right now? The voice was calm, indifferent, and carried a calming force within its steadiness. However, it seemed to be slightly unexpected in this hall where the atmosphere was originally tense to the extreme. However, it was precisely because it was unexpected that it greatly dispersed the tense atmosphere instead. In the next moment, many of them shot their gazes towards outside the hall, and then they saw a tall figure standing outside. He had a handsome appearance, and an indifferent and extraordinary bearing. Moreover, every single move he made carried a unique aura that was calm like an abyss. This figure was Xianxia. Xianxia Pujuan and Chen Haoyan were both stunned when they saw him make an appearance, and they seemed to have never imagined that this young man would actually make an appearance at this moment. The others didn't recognize Xianxia like the two of them did, but when they heard what Xianxia said, they faintly guessed Xianxia's identity. For a time, all of their expressions became slightly strange. This little fellow actually really came. Could it be that he's really able to restore the cauldron? Only Xianxia chuckled and shook his head before sighing with emotion. The students nowadays are really extraordinary. They dare to casually enter the core location of the pill reserve. He's simply lacking in upbringing and has no regard for the rules of the academy. Xianxia's voice was low, yet it was clearly heard by every single person within the hall. All of them frowned without end as they felt Xianxia's words was beneath the bearing a senior should possess. Chen Shi naturally heard it as well, and he raised his eyes to glance at Xianxia. A wisp of a piercingly cold expression flashed within the depths of his eyes. This old fellow that's short and fat like a gourd is probably Zhuoqiusheng, right? Li Bei and the other enforcers frowned in response to Xianxia's arrival. The restoration of the 9 profundity treasured cauldron and the investigation towards Shenyuan Pujuan isn't directly related. Young man, this matter isn't something you're able to interfere in. Li Bei spoke indifferently. Xianxia grinned instead and said calmly, then would Senior believe me if I said that the damage to the 9 profundity treasured cauldron isn't related to the refinement of a divining Dao transformation pill? As he spoke, he directly walked over to stand before the cauldron and carefully scanned the ancient cauldron. He said, of course, my words don't carry much weight, and all of you wouldn't believe me no matter what I said. But I have a method to prove what I said earlier. Everyone present was shocked when these words were spoken. Even Shenyuan Pujuan was stunned, and he didn't understand exactly what Xianxia planned to do. What method? Chen Haoyan couldn't refrain himself from asking. It's very simple. Ask Senior Treasured Cauldron directly, and all the questions you have will be resolved immediately. Xianxia replied casually. Senior Treasured Cauldron? Everyone was stunned, and they quickly recovered from their shock and realized that Xianxia was speaking about the 9 profundity treasured cauldron. How absurd! Not to mention that the cauldron is damaged at this moment. Even if it was whole, it has never made an appearance in the form of an artifact spirit. So how will you find out the answer from it? This is simply a bunch of irresponsible remarks. Zhuoqiusheng flatly objected to Xianxia's method, and his face was covered in a sneer and disdain. Xianxia glanced at Zhuoqiusheng and said calmly, if you've never seen it, it doesn't mean that the artifact spirit doesn't exist. Or perhaps, with your current ability, you don't have the qualifications to meet the treasured cauldron's artifact spirit. These words were spoken bluntly and without holding back in the slightest. Zhuoqiusheng was even more infuriated in his heart when he heard this. He was just about to do something when he was stopped by Mo Linghai that stood by his side. All right. It isn't good to make such a fuss with a junior. Zhuoqiusheng grunted coldly and glanced coldly at Xianxia before going silent. Yes, an artifact spirit had been born out of karmic luck when the 9 profundity treasured cauldron was created. However, in the boundless years of the past, it has only made very few appearances. Moreover, it even vanished in the last 10,000 years. If you want to make it speak on your behalf, then it's probably utterly impossible. Chen Haoyan frowned and spoke after pondering deeply. The other seniors nodded without end as well. The 9 profundity treasured cauldron had existed for too long, and its artifact spirit was even an existence that existed during the same period as the primeval Tao Emperor had. In the boundless years of the past, it very rarely showed itself, and up until now, they even suspected that the artifact spirit had left the academy a long time ago to seek a grand Tao of its own. Xianxia said calmly instead, everyone will know if it's possible after I restore the cauldron. Up until this point of the conversation, it had returned to the first topic, the restoration of the cauldron. Everyone here frowned when they heard this. Obviously, they weren't sure exactly where Xianxia got his confidence from, or why Xianxia would sincerely swear that he was able to restore the cauldron. Could it be that this young man at the intermediate stage of the mysterious immortal realm is capable of accomplishing what all these us old geezer can't? Shenyuan Pujuan had been coldly observing Xianxia since the beginning, and when he saw that Xianxia spoke and acted in a composed manner and didn't seem like he was bragging, Shenyuan Pujuan couldn't help but speak unhurriedly. Since it's like this, then why don't you give it a try? Xianxia nodded and glanced at the head enforcer, Li Bei, before he said, Senior, no matter what you intend to investigate, you ought to be in no rush, right? Why don't you wait a moment? Because perhaps Senior's strength will be needed when we restore the cauldron later. Li Bei was stunned. His cold and firm face revealed a strange expression as he glanced deeply at Xianxia and said, what if your method doesn't work? Xianxia said without the slightest hesitation. Then Xianxia, will be at your mercy. Everyone was astounded when they heard these words. They seemed to have never imagined that Xianxia would actually be ready to risk everything in order to help Shenyuan Pujuan. On the other hand, Zhuoqiusheng almost burst out with laughter instead. He was waiting for Xianxia to speak these exact words because in this way, so long as Xianxia was unable to restore the cauldron, then not only Xianxia, but even Xianxia would suffer calamity. This could be said to be killing two birds with one stone. Xianxia was horrified and moved instead, and he said, "Little child that doesn't know the immensity of things. What nonsense are you speaking? Quickly go restore the cauldron and don't ask about anything else." His voice was stern, yet it carried a strand of concern and protectiveness that wasn't concealed in the slightest. Xianxia grinned and said in his heart, "I already have a good relationship with Axiu. Now if I'm able to obtain the acknowledgement of some great figures from the Xianyuan clan, then it can be considered as a pleasant surprise." As he thought like this in his heart, Xianxia had arrived before the cauldron. During this entire process, Li Bei and the other enforcers hadn't stopped him, nor had they left. Obviously, they tacitly approved of Xianxia's actions, or perhaps it could be said that even they wanted to see if this young man was actually able to accomplish all of this. Was he playing tricks? Or did he possess real ability? The cauldron was 27 m tall and 3-legged, and it was suffused with an ancient aura that seemed material. Xianxia stood before it while his expression gradually became calm, serious, and even solemn. On the other hand, he was swiftly looking over numerous mysterious and profound talisman formation diagrams once more within his mind. These diagrams were deduced from the infinite divine talisman. They possessed unfathomable origins and were filled with the profundities of the heaven Tao. Even with Xianxia's understanding towards the Tao of talismans, he could only vaguely guess that this talisman formation diagram ought to be related to karmic luck. Karmic luck, a mysterious force that came from the heaven Tao and was impossible to be fathomed by the living beings of the three dimensions. The talisman formation diagram within the cauldron was actually related to karmic luck, so it wasn't Xianxia's fault that he wasn't able to completely comprehend it and could only rely on the infinite divine talisman to deduce its profundities. Seniors, I'll need to rely on all of you during the restoration of the cauldron later, whereas I'll tell all of you the methods to restore it. If this operation goes smoothly, then 6 hours will be sufficient to restore it completely. Xianxia pondered silently for a long time before his gaze recovered its clarity, and he spoke calmly. "Of course." Chen Haoyan nodded immediately. "The 9-profundity treasured cauldron is the ultimate treasure of the pill reserve after all, so we'll naturally not stand by idly." The others nodded successively as well, and it was even to the extent they eagerly looked forward to doing this. After all, in this way, they could understand the specifics of the method Xianxia utilized to restore the cauldron and find out exactly what secrets it possessed. Everyone didn't notice at all that they'd unknowingly aroused slight confidence towards Xianxia. At this moment, the expressions of everyone within the hall had become serious and solemn. They stood in a row before the cauldron while being ready to act. So long as Xianxia gave the command, they would act without the slightest hesitation. This little fellow is interesting. He was able to imperceptibly control the course of the situation. This isn't something that an ordinary genius can accomplish. In the distance, the head enforcer, Li Bei, seemed to be lost in thought in his heart. After he saw all these seniors standing obediently behind him while revealing a serious expression as if they were at his command, an indescribably sense of accomplishment arose in Xianxia's heart. If all these seniors of the academy were under my command, then taking down the entire Wuxia clan would probably be as easy as blowing off dust, right? Xianxia sighed with emotion in his heart while his gaze inadvertently glanced over and noticed that Li Bei and the others were still standing in the distance. He immediately invited them. "Senior, please come over as well. I'll need to rely on all your strengths to restore the cauldron in a moment." The other seniors of the Pill Reserve frowned. They didn't like the enforcers, but they were unable to understand the meaning behind Xianxia's actions, so they didn't speak out with any objections and chose to watch coldly. Li Bei and the other enforcers frowned as well. They seemed to have never imagined that Xianxia would actually invite all of them over. They glanced at each other before finally looking at Li Bei. Li Bei didn't give it any extra thought and immediately waved his hand before he said, "As a member of the Academy, and since we have the opportunity to participate in the restoration of the 9-profundity treasured cauldron, We're naturally duty-bound to assist. As soon as these words were spoken, it actually aroused a trace of a favorable impression from the seniors of the Pill Reserve. Of course, it was merely a trace, and it was impossible to be more than that. At this point, only Zhuoqiu Shang still sat cross-legged in the distance. His eyelids dropped while he sneered in his heart. Humph! A nobody like you made so many great figures fool around with you. It would be the greatest joke when you fail in the end. Everyone was clearly aware that it was impossible for him to come forward and assist Xianxia, so they paid no attention to him. Seniors, the damaged talisman formation diagram within the cauldron is too complicated. I've already broken the method down and passed it to all of you. All of you only have to listen to my instructions before making a move later. Xianxia's expression was calm as he spoke swiftly via voice transmission. At the same time, he'd passed over numerous mysterious talisman formation diagrams to the others via his immortal sense. All of them carefully inspected the talisman formation diagram within their seas of consciousness, and they firmly remembered it in an instant. However, they didn't know exactly what profundities it contained. After all, these were a talisman formation diagram that had been broken down, so it was normal that they were unable to discern its profundities. Xianxia couldn't be bothered about all of this. He took a large stride forward while his palm suddenly emanated a strand of immortal force, and then he slapped it down onto the cauldron, causing a strange and heavy droning to resound. Instantly, expanse after expanse of extremely complicated talisman formation diagrams suddenly surged out from the surface of the cauldron. It was vast like a boundless starry sky, and it was infinitely profound and aroused the reverence of all. However, there was an incomplete area that was like a black hole at the side, and it destroyed the completeness of the talisman formation diagrams possessed by the cauldron. Everyone here was clearly aware that it was the damaged area of the cauldron. If it wasn't restored as soon as possible, then the damaged area would spread like ink and corrode the other areas of the cauldron. "Do it," said Xianxia via voice transmission. All of them immediately and swiftly formed various different talisman formation diagrams according to Xianxia's instructions, and these diagrams were condensed within thick immortal force before they surge into the cauldron like tidewater. The cauldron rumbled violently while emanating an ancient, aged, and extremely heavy aura. The brilliance of divinity effused out and revealed an enormous rain of light that illuminated the entire hall. At this moment, even Zhuoqiu Shang became nervous, and he muttered in his heart, "This kid will definitely not succeed, he'll definitely won't." The treasured cauldron erupted with divine light that illuminated the hall, while the shapeless energy of divinity swept out towards the surroundings, while emanating a desolate, ancient, and deep aura. Everyone had the faint feeling as if this treasured cauldron before them that had existed since the primeval times seemed as if it was about to awaken from its deep slumber. At that instant, their confidence towards Xianxia's method of restoration grew once more. Originally, they were skeptical towards Xianxia's method of restoration and retained a strand of doubt in their hearts. Yet now, the doubt in their hearts had lightened greatly. After all, they weren't even able to recognize the damaged talisman formation diagram, let alone cause such a phenomenon to occur. This obviously showed that Xianxia's method of restoration was working for now. This scene caused all of them to be even more serious and solemn. Even if they were unable to figure out the secrets contained within the talisman formation diagrams that Xianxia conveyed to them, not a single one of them dared be careless as they acted. Xianxia was completely unaware of all of this. Even though he wasn't physically taking part in the process of restoration, yet his entire mind was converged onto the cauldron because he still had to command these seniors before him, so he didn't have the slightest thought to think about anything else. If he wasn't wrong, then the quality of the 9-profundity treasured cauldron had exceeded the void grade since a long time ago, and coupled with the talisman formation diagrams related to karmic luck that were branded onto it, it was extremely difficult to completely restore the cauldron. At the very least, it was utterly impossible to be completed by Xianxia alone. Fortunately, Xianxia didn't have to act on his own. Practically all the seniors present here were existences at the half-step Immortal King realm, while the others were either supreme grandmasters in the Tao of Talismans or the Tao of Pills. So the possibility of success would undoubtedly be even greater with them acting on his behalf to restore the cauldron. OM. Along with the passage of time, the trembling of the cauldron grew louder and louder. It was deep like the drum of the gods, yet was also like the shouts of the ancient people of the primeval time, and it was desolate, ancient, and aroused reverence in the hearts of all. If commoners were to hear this sound, then they would surely think the heavens had sent down a decree, and they would definitely kneel down and kowtow without end. Later on, the sound emanated by the cauldron even spread out of the hall and throughout the Pill Reserve. The mountains, rivers, boundless sky, vast ground, and everything else reverberated with this ancient rumbling of the cauldron. It was like the tune of the heavens, the chanting of the grand Tao, and it caused the heavens and the earth to be bathed in a divine atmosphere. At this moment, the instructors and students who were in class within the Pill Reserve had stopped everything they were doing, and they revealed shocked expressions while their hearts felt as if it had been cleansed. They were immersed within this feeling and were unable to free themselves from it. Once all of this has ended, do as I said and bring that sword back. At the same time, a voice that seemed to be indifferent, yet was actually grand, and seemed to be warm and flat yet was actually dignified and supreme sounded out from within an unknown and mysterious space in the depths of the academy. Yes, master. How could this be possible? Xianxia's eyes opened wide, while his chubby face couldn't help but reveal a wisp of astonishment. Moreover, the corners of his mouth couldn't be restrained from twitching fiercely. The restoration of the cauldron hadn't ended, so he shouldn't be astounded to such an extent. But when he saw the divine radiance emanated by the cauldron and heard the rumbling of the cauldron that grew grander by the moment, he was unable to maintain his calm any longer. Because all of this seemed to be moving towards the direction of success, and it didn't show the slightest sign of failure. That's a problem that perplexed all the instructors of the Pill Reserve. How could a little bastard at the intermediate stage of the mysterious immortal realm like him possibly accomplish it? Could it be that an expert guided him from behind the scenes? Xianxia's expression changed indeterminately, while the gaze he shot at Xianxia's figure bluntly revealed a wisp of detest, maliciousness, and resentment. This won't do. I absolutely can't watch as this occurs. Xianxia gritted his teeth and seemed to have made an extremely difficult decision, causing his expression to faintly become slightly savage. In the next moment, he'd stood up and taken a deep breath before he actually squeezed out a wisp of a grin on his face and strode towards Xianxia as he said, "Fellow Taoists, I'll lend all of you a hand as well." As he spoke, he intended to move forward and approach them. Suddenly, a hand appeared out of thin air and landed onto his shoulder. It seemed to be a gentle and slow action, yet it actually caused Xianxia's entire body to stiffen while his countenance turned pale. No matter how he tried, he was actually unable to move in the slightest. Instructor Xianxia, it's sufficient for you to observe calmly from the side. An icy cold and aloof voice resounded by his ears, yet it was like a bone-piercing cold wind that caused Xianxia's fat figure to suddenly shudder. He didn't need to turn around to know that the owner of this voice was Hua Jiankong. So it's fellow Taoist Jiankong. May I know the reason for your arrival? Xianxia forcefully squeezed out a smile before he turned around and spoke. Sure enough, he saw Hua Jiankong, who wore gray clothes and had snow-white hair, was standing by his side. Moreover, he actually didn't notice when Hua Jiankong had appeared within the hall, or when Hua Jiankong had arrived by his side. I've come under the orders of my master. Hua Jiankong answered indifferently before falling silent, and then he placed his gaze towards the distant cauldron. On the other hand, Xianxia was completely stunned. He came under the orders of his master. Doesn't this mean that the dean noticed everything that occurred here? Then exactly what order did Hua Jiankong receive? Is it to punish Shenyuan Pejuan? Or does he have another objective? Xianxia's thoughts instantly fell into chaos. He was able to faintly sense that all his guesses were probably wrong. Perhaps Hua Jiankong's appearance is related to Chen Shi? An inexplicable wave of agitation arose in his heart when he thought up to hear. He was clearly aware as well that when the new student's recruitment test ended, it was precisely Hua Jiankong who'd appeared out of thin air and stopped all the seniors of the academy from fighting to take Chen Shi as their personal disciple. Yet now, Hua Jiankong had just happened to appear once more when Xianxia was restoring the 9 profundity treasured cauldron. So wasn't this too much of a coincidence? Exactly what's going on? The more he thought about it, to be more bewildered he was, and Zhuoqiu Shang's head started aching slightly. Right at this moment, a fluctuation that shook the heavens and the earth rumbled through the sky, and it shook the 9 heavens and struck the nether springs. It shook Zhuoqiu Shang to the point his heart trembled fiercely while the vital blood within his entire body roiled, and he suddenly awoke from his wild thoughts. We succeeded. It actually really worked. I never expected this. I truly never expected this. We're vainly addressed as Supreme Talisman Formation Grandmasters, yet we actually can't even compare to a student. The young really are fearsome. A wave of exclamations of shock rose and fell as they entered into Zhuoqiu Shang's ears. He raised his eyes to look and saw all the others had surrounded the cauldron while viewing it. Moreover, the shock, admiration, and excitement on their faces was impossible to conceal. It was as if they were admiring a peerless precious treasure. Even Li Bei and the other enforcers revealed a wisp of a gratified expression. He actually really succeeded. Zhuoqiu Shang felt dizzy, and he was slightly unable to accept this scene before his eyes. He originally intended to rely on this to strike a blow upon Shenyuan Pujuan, and to this end, he didn't hesitate to invite enforcers over at great cost. Yet how could he have imagined that such a scene would occur? Ha! Not bad. Not bad. Not bad at all. Shenyuan Pujuan roared with laughter and was extremely delighted. Every time he said the words not bad, he would swing his palm and pat Xianxia on the shoulder, and it hurt to the point the latter gnashed his teeth. This was the palm of an existence at the half-step Immortal King realm, so even if he didn't put any force into it, it was still powerful to Xianxia. Others like Shenyuan Tong and the Supreme Talisman Formation Grandmasters of the Shenyuan clan looked at Xianxia with gazes that carried a wisp of heartfelt admiration and emotion. Alas, if I knew you had such ability, I would have risked going against the decree of the dean to take you as my personal disciple. A pity, truly a pity. The Pill Reserve's dean, Chen Haoyan, sighed repeated as he looked at Xianxia, and he seemed to be filled with regret. The other seniors of the Pill Reserve deeply agreed as well. If such an outstanding student like Xianxia, who possessed such attainments in the Tao of Talismans at such a young age, came to cultivate in the Pill Reserve, then it would absolutely be the fortune of the Pill Reserve. Xianxia just smiled and stayed silent when facing all this praise, while he heaved a sigh of relief in his heart instead and felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted off his shoulders. Truthfully speaking, there was quite a bit of pressure in his heart before he came here. Fortunately, all of it had passed. He hadn't just restored the 9 profundity treasured cauldron, but even obtained the friendship of all the seniors from the Pill Reserve and the Shenyuan clan. This was what he attached most importance to. If he were to encounter trouble within the academy in the future, then these seniors would definitely not sit by idly. Even if they didn't help him, they would absolutely not help another deal with him. This was more than enough. Xianxia, you did well this time. The head enforcer, Li Bei, spoke as well. His cold and stern expression had eased up greatly. Obviously, Xianxia's display from before had won a great deal of recognition from Li Bei. But in the next moment, Li Bei changed the topic and said, however, even though this matter is resolved, the matter related to the divinering Tao transformation pill hasn't. As soon as these words were spoken, the bustling atmosphere in the hall instantly went silent. All the seniors here frowned while Shenyuan Pujuan and the others didn't conceal their detest and displeasure. However, Xianxia seemed to have expected this question from Li Bei since the beginning. He stared at the 9 profundity treasured cauldron and smiled as he interrupted Li Bei. Senior, wait a moment and you'll understand yourself. His voice was calm and revealed a strand of extreme confidence. He'd said to wait for a moment, yet actually, as soon as Xianxia finished speaking, the 9 profundity treasured cauldron suddenly emanated a strand of an indescribably mysterious aura that enveloped the entire hall. At the same time, the great figures that participated in the restoration of the cauldron simultaneously sensed an auspicious, peaceful, grand, pure, and thick aura surge through their bodies. It felt like a strand of extremely pure energy was cleansing their Tao foundation and hearts, and their entire bodies emanated a strand of an indescribable aura of the grand Tao. Everyone was shocked in their hearts. Karmic luck of the heaven Tao. Xianyuan Pujuan's eyes erupted with strands of dazzling bolts of lightning, while he lightly spat out a few words. Every single word he spoke was like a thunderclap that shocked all the seniors present in the hall to the point of being shocked speechless. A wisp of an arc appeared on the corners of Xianxia's mouth when he saw this. He glanced at the 9 profundity treasured cauldron as he muttered in his heart. Sure enough, those talisman formation diagrams were related to karmic luck. Karmic luck, a mysterious energy that came from the heaven Tao. It seemed to be ethereal, yet it actually affected the movement of the 3 dimensions. The myriad of things in the world had spirits of their own, and they were born out of destiny. Then karmic luck was the destiny of the heaven Tao. The benefits of karmic luck could be said to be boundless. Those that possessed great karmic luck were usually eminent figures on the path towards the Tao and were praised as favorites of the heavens. For figures at the half-step Immortal King realm, charging into the Immortal King realm was like fighting with the heaven Tao, and what they fought for was a strand of karmic luck of the heaven Tao. This was the principle behind the saying, "It's impossible to become a king without karmic luck." On the other hand, Xianxia similarly had a very deep understanding towards karmic luck because he'd obtained an innate auspicious beast, an infant Pisho, a very long time ago. During these years whereby Kuei was by his side, he repeatedly obtained fortuitous encounters on his path of cultivation while turning calamities into blessing. His experiences could be said to be legendary to the extreme. At this moment, the strand of karmic luck of the heaven Tao that effused out from the 9 profundity treasured cauldron was like an enormous gift. It caused everyone present here that participated in the restoration of the treasured cauldron to obtain extraordinary benefits. Especially Xianyuan Pujuan, Chun Haoyan, Li Bei, and other such existences at the half-step Immortal King realm. When they sensed that they'd obtained a strand of karmic luck of the heaven Tao, they felt uncontrollably excited even with their firm Tao hearts. Because it was karmic luck. It was related to whether they were able to charge into the Immortal King realm or not. How could they not be excited? On the other hand, the others were shocked speechless as well. None of them had imagined that the 9 profundity treasured cauldron would actually divide out some karmic luck of the heaven Tao and award it to them at this moment. This was simply more precious than obtaining a void-grade immortal artifact and was absolutely an extraordinary fortune that could only be chanced upon by luck. Karmic luck of the heaven Tao. Why is it like this? Why didn't I get any? Similarly, Wuxia Shang had sensed the karmic luck of the heaven Tao as well, but he felt aggrieved because from the beginning until the end, he was actually unable to obtain even a strand of it. In other words, he could only watch helplessly and sense it, yet he was unable to take possession of it. All of this caused Wuxia Shang's expression to change indeterminately, and it was extremely complicated. The atmosphere in the hall was solemn, and it carried aura that almost seemed like sacred silence. "Thank you." It was amidst this silence that the head enforcer, Li Bei, turned around and looked at Xianxia before solemnly expressing his gratitude. It was merely 2 words, yet everyone present here was able to perceive the trace of gratitude within it. This caused everyone to be surprised, and they were slightly puzzled by it. Xianxia grinned instead and said, "This is something that Senior deserved. You're welcome to drop by at the Hall of Enforcers if you have the time." Li Bei was silent for a short moment before he glanced deeply at Xianxia, and then he turned around and waved his hand to the other enforcers. "Let's go. This matter isn't related to Xianyuan Pujuan." In the next moment, he'd led all the enforcers and left the hall. He left very abruptly and unexpectedly, but he'd left in the end. When they saw that these executioners with hands that were covered with blood had left, everyone within the hall heaved a long sigh of relief and felt their entire bodies relax. "Why? Have they left just like that?" Xianyuan Tong asked with shock. "Even the 9 profundity treasured cauldron awarded me with a strand of karmic luck, so how could they dare continue pressuring me?" Xianyuan Pujuan had seen through all of this, and he said, "Not to mention that if it wasn't for Xianxia, it would be impossible for them to obtain the karmic luck of the heaven Tao, and that's an extraordinarily great fortune. Under these circumstances, not only would they not dare pursue the matter against me, they even have to thank Xianxia for inviting them to participate in the restoration of the cauldron. Because if it wasn't for that, they can only dream of obtaining a shred of karmic luck of the heaven Tao. Xianxia came to a sudden understanding and glanced at Xianxia with a strange expression before he said in his heart, "Could it be that this little fellow prepared all of this since the beginning?" The others quickly guessed this as well. For a time, all of their gazes towards Xianxia changed, and the praise within their gazes revealed a trace of indescribable surprise and admiration. No one had expected that a young man who just entered the academy would actually be able to resolve Xianxuan's predicament by himself and even flawlessly deal with the problem that plagued the 9 treasured cauldron. It wasn't just that. If he hadn't invited all of them to participate in the restoration, then how could they have obtained the karmic luck awarded by the cauldron? This seemed to be something awarded by the 9 treasured cauldron, but they would definitely be unable to obtain it without Xianxia. In this way, Xianxia could be said to have obtained the friendship and recognition of all these seniors in one go. Merely based on this, if anyone desired to deal with Xianxia in the academy, they would at least have to consider the attitude of these seniors. Especially the head enforcer Li Bei, he really favored Xianxia. So when they thought up to here, many seniors actually felt a trace of envy towards Xianxia. This little fellow's ability is really extraordinary. With enforcers protecting him, would he have to worry about any instructor daring to look for trouble with him? After all, the enforcers specialize in supervising the instructors of the academy. Xianxia, come over here. Suddenly, a cold and aloof voice resounded, and it caused the hearts of everyone present here to jerk. They turned their heads to look and were surprised to notice that Hua Jiankong was standing at a corner of the hall, and the short and fat Zuoqiushang was standing by his side. However, no one paid any attention to Zuoqiushang, and practically everyone's gazes descended onto Hua Jiankong, while their expressions more or less carried a trace of surprise. They seemed to have never expected that Hua Jiankong, who was the personal disciple of the dean, would suddenly make an appearance here. When did he arrive? No one was aware. Of course, all of this wasn't important. The important thing was that Hua Jiankong seemed to have not come for the sake of the 9 treasured cauldron, and he seemed to have come specially for Xianxia. Why did he come for Xianxia? All the seniors here were puzzled. Xianxia was stunned as well. But before he could make any reaction, he felt the scene before his eyes flash. In the next moment, he'd appeared within a strange space. This was a world covered in snow and ice. The ice was bone-piercing and boundless. Hua Jiankong, who had snow-white hair and wore gray clothes, stood upright atop a rock of ice. His figure was ramrod straight while he seemed to be the king of this world, and he emanated a supreme imposing aura that was aloof, icy cold, and arrogant. There are 3 swords here. They were respectively utilized by me when I was at the levels of Sword Grandmaster, Supreme Sword Grandmaster, and Sword God. Hua Jiankong spoke with a voice that was colder than snow, and it revealed an aloof and desolate aura. He paused for a moment before he said, "Leave your sword behind." As soon as he finished speaking, Xianxia suddenly noticed there was a rock before him, and on the rock was 3 swords that were embedded into it. The first sword was snow-white like silver. It was a meter in length and revealed a razor edge. It emanated a murderous and icy cold aura that assaulted the face, and it seemed as if it was capable of freezing one's blood. A name was inscribed before the rock, Snow Mortis. The second sword was completely pitch black and thin like the wings of a cicada. It seemed very ordinary, yet when his gaze descended onto it, it seemed like a strand of scarlet red blood was burning, howling, and surging on the blade of the sword. It seemed to intend to effuse out from the sword and dye the heavens and the earth red. The name of the sword was Bloodsnow. When Xianxi's gaze swept towards the third sword, his heart couldn't help but shake. It was clearly an extremely ordinary sword that even seemed slightly simple, but at that instant, it was like he'd seen a deep starry sky with a myriad of stars dazzling within it. It emanated a vast might that caused even his mind to be unable to refrain from trembling. The name of the sword was Starclasp, to clasp the stars in the 9 heavens. Xianxia took a deep breath before his brows knit together tightly, and then he gazed at the distant Hua Jiankong with a slightly surprised and bewildered expression. Up until now, he still didn't understand what Hua Jiankong meant. Choose a sword and leave mine behind? Why? Presently, there were 3 immortal swords in Xianxia's possession, and they were respectively the Yazi clan's Saint's Laughter Forbidden Sword, the 9 Radiant Sword Sect's Tao Calamity Sword that came from the Sword Cave, and the talisman armament he refined himself. The Saint's Laughter Forbidden Sword was a forbidden weapon that had once aroused the covetous intentions of Eternal Spirit Mountain, whereas the Tao Calamity Sword was the precious treasure of the 9 Radiant Sword Sect and was related to some secrets of the chaotic Divine Lotus. No matter what, it was impossible for him to hand over either one of these 2 swords. On the other hand, the talisman armament was related to the inheritance of Oracle Mountain and was a treasure that had accompanied Xianxia until now, so it was impossible for him to hand it over as well. Even if all 3 of Hua Jiankong's swords were rare precious treasures amongst swords, he was utterly unable to arouse the slightest shred of interest. Why? Said Xianxia. He was faintly able to sense that Hua Jiankong would definitely not compromise if he didn't do as Hua Jiankong had said. Most importantly, he was utterly unaware exactly which sword Hua Jiankong wanted him to leave behind. The Dean's orders. Hua Jiankong's reply was very simple, and he spoke casually as if he'd guessed that Xianxia would ask this question. The Dean. Xianxia's eyes focused, and he said in his heart, "This Dean really doesn't act according to convention. He prohibited the other instructors from taking me as a personal disciple when I just entered the academy. Now he sent Hua Jiankong over to take away my sword. What exactly is the meaning of this? If you don't know how to choose, then why don't I help you?" Hua Jiankong suddenly turned around to look directly at Xianxia. "Wait, what if I don't agree?" Xianxia frowned. Hua Jiankong didn't answer yet, suddenly stretched out his hand. He formed a sword with his fingers before casually stabbing towards the space before him. Swish! Space was like a shattered piece of cloth and was easily torn apart. A strand of shapeless sword chi tore through the sky in a matchlessly sharp manner. The strength of this point seemed to be relaxed and flat, yet it actually contained a supreme penetrative force. It gave others the feeling that it carried the terrifying imposing aura where if the heavens and the earth dared to obstruct it, then it would definitely pierce a hole through the heavens and the earth. Enlightened Sword Heart. The might of a sword grandmaster. Xianxia's eyes narrowed slightly. This strike didn't contain the energy of any laws, and it was an extremely pure strand of sword chi. But its fierce and swift imposing aura had already attained the level of grandmaster in the sword Tao. However, this couldn't trouble Xianxia at all. In the next moment, he'd similarly formed a sword with his fingers and stabbed with it. A strand of terrifying sword chi that had similarly attained the level of grandmaster shot out. Bang! The 2 strands of sword chi collided in midair and transformed into tiny bits that rumbled as they spread towards the surroundings. And they minced apart the wind and snow in an area of 5,000 kilometers and swept through the entire sky. The level of sword grandmaster. Not bad. Hua Jiankong's expression was calm and seemed to not be surprised. As he spoke, his slender and fair hand pointed once more. Hiss! A sharp howl that was like the howl of a beast tearing apart his eardrums tore through the heavens and the earth. The powerful sword chi was too terrifying, and it filled this strike as it struck out while carrying an imposing aura capable of destroying all techniques. This was the might of destroying all techniques with a single strike, and it belonged to the abilities that only a supreme grandmaster in the sword Tao could grasp. This sort of sword chi was very familiar to Xianxia because the sword Tao he'd grasped until now had attained this step, so he was very well aware of how terrifying the might contained within it was. He didn't hesitate, nor did he spare it the slightest thought. Xianxia similarly formed a sword with his fingers before sword chi sprayed out from the tip of his finger, and it condensed into a shapeless strand of sword chi. The space in the surroundings were like shattered ripples as they shattered beneath this sword chi, and then a spatial ripple swept out. There was 30 kilometers of distance between him and Hua Jiankong. If there was a spectator here, then the person would definitely be able to discern that Hua Jiankong's sword chi was icy cold, murderous, and swept over like a violent snowstorm. On the other hand, Xianxia's sword chi seemed like it was formed from a row of dense and profound talisman markings. It was refined, clean, and revealed a uniquely fierce aura that caused one's heart to palpitate. Both of them had attained the ability to destroy all techniques with a single strike of the sword. But the sword Dao that they'd mastered were obviously two different paths. There was no difference in quality, and only a difference in superiority. Bang! The strands of sword chi collided and transformed into a chaotic flow of obliteration that swept towards the surroundings. The level of Supreme Grandmaster in the sword Dao. Looks like Snow Mortis and Bloods now are both unsuitable for you. Hua Jiankong went silent for a moment when he saw this, and he seemed to be slightly surprised and felt slightly gratified at the same time. In the end, his expression recovered its cold and aloof state from before. Only now did Xianxia understand that Hua Jiankong was probing him with those two strikes from before to find out exactly which sword was suitable for him. This caused Xianxia to frown before he said, "Why do you insist on doing this?" Hua Jiankong said, "Obstruct another strike of mine and I'll give you an explanation." Hua Jiankong's expression became serious while a wisp of arrogance and pride appeared between his brows. He was like a peerless immortal sword that had left its sheath and suddenly emanated the supreme ability that it possessed. At this instant, the tip of his finger slashed through the air. The entire heavens and the earth suddenly transformed into darkness, and only a spot of dazzling and resplendent light suddenly lit up. It was like a star that had been lit up in the darkness. At this moment, the heavens and the earth dimmed down, and only that spot of entrancing light remained. What sort of sword chi was it? It seized the fortune of the heavens and the earth and contained boundless variations within a single point. As soon as it appeared, the heavens, the earth, and everything in the world seemed to have become a part of that strand of sword chi, and they'd formed a complete whole that didn't have any flaws. It was like going against the entire world, and one intended to destroy this strand of sword chi, then one had to destroy the heavens and the earth. At this moment, time seemed to have slowed down while Xianxi's eyes suddenly constricted. He felt an oppressive sword chi that was impossible to resist, and it struck straight to his heart. It seemed as if it desired to slash apart his thoughts, and even slice away his wisdom, memories, and everything he possessed. The sword and heart are like part of me. The heavens and the earth are my tools. The heavens and the earth are my heart, and my heart is like my sword. That was the level of sword god. As he watched as the wisp of light that seemed to have illuminated the world became clearer in his field of vision, and sensed the terrifying and dangerous aura it contained, Xianxia suddenly closed his eyes instead. In his mind, countless thoughts appeared in an instant. The sword Dao presses forward with indomitable will. With conviction in heart, everything in the heavens and the earth are the sword in my heart. Regardless of grand Dao, minor Dao, or the various profundities, everything can be fused into the sword Dao. The grand Dao is in my heart, and the grand Dao is my sword. The sword Dao is like my heart. Xianxia opened his eyes and every single pore on his body gushed with sword chi. It was like his entire body had transformed into a peerless sword. At this moment, the bearing he revealed was actually faintly similar to Hua Jiankong, but it wasn't so overbearing, complete, and flawless like Hua Jiankong. Hua Jiankong was stunned, and he seemed to have noticed something. A strand of divine light erupted from his eyes, and he didn't seem to make any movement. Yet the heavens and the earth returned once more to calmness. Even the spot of sword chi he executed earlier had evaporated into thin air and vanished without a trace. He stared at the distant Xianxia while a trace of a complicated feeling arose in his heart. He was even able to undergo sudden enlightenment at such a moment. Isn't this fellow's natural endowment a little bit too? In the end, he shook his head and was unable to find a word to describe Xianxia. On the other hand, numerous indescribable comprehensions surged out into Xianxi's heart at this moment, while the experience he'd obtained from being immersed in the sword Dao all through these years had even swiftly appeared, converged, condensed, and improved within his heart. The sword Dao was a grand Dao of technique. It was the number one in terms of resolute slaughter. From the earliest stages of basic, advanced, and unity, all of it was a type of tempering and polishing of the sword Dao, and when the sword heart was enlightened, then it could be considered as the level of grandmaster. Above the Grandmaster level was the ability to destroy all techniques with a single strike, and it was called the Supreme Grandmaster level. But all of this wasn't the ending, because above the level of Supreme Grandmaster were the levels of Sword God and Sword Saint. In other words, after the ability to destroy all techniques with a single strike was the level of Sword God, where the heart was like the sword, and the heavens and the earth were used as tools. Once one attained this level, then everything in the world was the sword in one's heart. For example, Hua Jiankong was an existence at the level of Sword God. It was precisely because of this third strike Hua Jiankong executed that Chen Shi's accumulation had erupted, allowing him to touch upon a trace of the true essence of the level of Sword God. Thus, he experienced a sort of sudden enlightenment in the Sword Tao. With time, Chen Shi would be entirely capable of relying on this sudden enlightenment to break through the barriers and attain the profundities of the level of Sword God. After a long time, Chen Shi raised his head and said, "Thank you for showing mercy. I'm indeed unable to resist that third strike of yours right now." Hua Jiankong shook his head. Some people were unable to resist it now and were bound to be unable to resist it in the future, because their pursuit in the Tao of the Sword can only stop at the level of Supreme Grandmaster. On the other hand, you're unlike them. From now onwards, you already possess the potential to charge into the level of Sword God. It won't be long before this strike will be unable to cause any harm to you. Chen Shi knew that Hua Jiankong was speaking of the cultivation in the Sword Tao, and it didn't include his own cultivation or energy of the laws. But being able to obtain the recognition of an existence that was at the level of Sword God still caused him to be rather delighted. Clang! Hua Jiankong stretched out his hand and gestured, and he took the immortal sword, Star Clasp, in his hand before looking directly at Chen Shi. This is an extreme rank cosmic grade immortal sword, and it was personally awarded to me by my master when I attained the level of Sword God. It's of no use to me now, so take it. As he spoke, he flicked his sleeve, causing Starclasp to transform into a ray of light that flew gently towards Chen Shi. Wait, I don't intend to leave behind any immortal sword. Chen Shi frowned. Could it be that you intend to expose your identity within the academy? Hua Jiankong replied with a question. It was only a single sentence, yet it caused Chen Shi to be shocked in his heart. His gaze swept towards Hua Jiankong like a bolt of lightning, yet saw the latter's expression remained completely icy cold and aloof as it was before. The dean intends to take the talisman armament away? Chen Shi was unable to refrain himself in the end and asked about it. Hua Jiankong nodded. He wasn't surprised at all when he heard the words talisman armament. At this point, Chen Shi finally came to an understanding. It turned out that the Dean of Tao Emperor Academy was aware of his identity a long time ago. Moreover, according to what Hua Jiankong said, the Dean obviously desired to conceal his identity by taking the talisman armament away. But why? For the sake of protecting the secrets of Oracle Mountain's inheritance? Or perhaps that once my identity is exposed, it will cause some sort of calamity or trouble. Chen Shi was unable to figure it out. It's only temporary. You don't have to worry about anything. When he saw Chen Shi remain silent, Hua Jiankong added, even though I'm unable to guess the meaning behind the Dean's actions, it's absolutely not to harm you. Chen Shi's brows raised, and he said, Can I meet the Dean? Hua Jiankong answered without the slightest hesitation. Yes, but not now. The Dean will naturally meet you when the time comes. Chen Shi went silent once more. After a long time, he took out the talisman armament in the end and passed it to Hua Jiankong before he said, Please, take good care of it. Hua Jiankong nodded. Thank you. Chen Shi cupped his hands before turning around and leaving. If you're going to charge into the golden immortal realm, then you can ask the 9 profundity treasured cauldron to refine the primordial azure lotus into medicinal pills. Hua Jiankong spoke abruptly. Chen Shi's figure stopped moving before he said, The Dean wouldn't be called Mengxinghe, right? Hua Jiankong remained silent. Up until the point Chen Shi left, Hua Jiankong finally moved his gaze towards the talisman armament in his hand. The tip of his finger lightly stroked the simple, icy cold, and ancient blade of the sword, while a wisp of indescribable amazement appeared between his brows. All those years ago, everyone said that I was sword-crazed, Yet no one knew that amongst the various swords in the world, only a mere few can satisfy me. The talisman armament is one of them. Unfortunately, it isn't mine in the end. Within the hall in the Pill Reserve, after Chen Shi and Hua Jiankong vanished abruptly, all the seniors here were slightly shocked and bewildered. Why exactly did Hua Jiankong come looking for Chen Shi? No one was able to guess the answer. Since they were unable to guess it, they stopped. In the end moment, Xianyuan Pajuan's attention had descended onto Zhuoqiu Shang, and a wisp of a cold and ridiculing smile appeared on the corners of his mouth. He walked over with large strides and said as he walked, "Fatty, you issued the assignment to restore the 9 profundity treasured cauldron. Now that the assignment has been completed, what are you still standing there for? Quickly acknowledge the completion of the assignment and give Chen Shi the reward." His voice was powerful, allowing everyone present here to hear it clearly. The repeated failures that his plans suffered had caused Zhuoqiu Shang's to be depressed and aggrieved in his heart to the point of being on the verge of spitting blood. At this moment, when he saw Xianyuan Pajuan coming at him, his face instantly flushed red while he said with an offended expression, "Did I say I wouldn't give it to him? That's Chen Shi's business. So why are you, Xianyuan Pajuan, being so anxious?" Xianyuan Pajuan revealed even deeper disdain and spat forcefully on the ground. "I'm afraid you'd go back on your word and shamelessly bully a junior. It's the fine tradition of your Zhuoqiu clan. So I have no choice but to take precautions against it." Zhuoqiu Shang was utterly infuriated and said in a grim voice, "You dare humiliate my Zhuoqiu clan?" Xianyuan Pajuan didn't mind at all, and he waved his hand as he said impatiently, "Cut the crap. If you still don't do it, then I don't mind beating you up here. Make the choice yourself." If these words were spoken by anyone else, then perhaps the people present here might doubt it slightly. But when these words were spoken by Xianyuan Pajuan, there was absolutely no one that doubted it, because he was a formidable figure that was like a madman and possessed a disposition that was piercingly cold like a blade. Once he went into a frenzy. Even the dean of the inner court, Qi Zongxing, was unable to stop him. So in the next moment, everyone revealed a wisp of a helpless expression. They wanted to persuade him, yet didn't dare because all of them were aware that it was impossible to persuade Xianyuan Pajuan, and he would go even crazier the more he was persuaded. On the other hand, Zhuoqiu Shang's expression changed once more, and his chubby face twitched repeatedly without end. Zhuoqiu Shang was too infuriated and aggrieved indeed. All his plans had failed successively today. Moreover, being pressured repeatedly by Xianyuan Pajuan at this moment caused him to arouse the impulse to spit blood and go berserk. Suffer a beating? Zhuoqiu Shang did firmly believe that this madman, Xianyuan Pajuan, would absolutely do as he said. In the end, he forcefully endured the mass of discomfort he felt as he withdrew his violet ribbon star crest and acknowledged the completion of the assignment in a fierce manner. A strange fluctuation stretched out, and then Zhuoqiu Shang could only watch as 800,000 star points that belonged to him vanished, and it flowed into Chen Shi's possession. Those were 800,000 star points. Even if he was one of the head instructors in the Pill Reserve, it was impossible for him to regain such a sum without spending 2 to 3 months of time. Of course, this wasn't enough to make Zhuoqiu Shang's heart ache. The reason he felt aggrieved and vexed the most was that in this way, he'd indirectly yielded before Xianyuan Pajuan, and this was the most intolerable thing to him. Humph! As he sensed the unusual gazes that shot towards him from the surroundings, Zhuoqiu Shang simply felt as if he was sitting on a bed of needles, and he wasn't willing to stay here for another moment. He flicked his sleeve angrily and left. "Fatty, I'll definitely repay your Zhuoqiu clan for this great courtesy it has shown me." Xianyuan Pajuan's voice sounded out from behind him, and it caused Zhuoqiu Shang's expression to freeze. After that, he quickened his pace and left hastily because he had to have a proper discussion with his clansmen about everything that had happened today. "If we weren't in the academy, I'll definitely skin that despicable bastard alive." Xianyuan Pajuan withdrew his gaze and grunted coldly with disdain. The others glanced at each other and sighed endlessly in their hearts. They weren't willing to be mixed up in the enmity between the Xianyuan clan and Zhuoqiu clan. Swoosh! Right at this moment, A wave of spatial fluctuation arose before Xianxi's figure emerged. All the others, including Shenyuan Pujuan, were stunned when they saw Xianxi, and then they revealed a wisp of amiable expressions as they moved forward, while successively inquiring with concern about what had happened earlier. Xianxi, Hua Jiankong didn't cause any trouble for you, right? Come. Let's sit down and have a proper chat. A young and promising student like you is really rare. You over there. Go boil a bowl of the drifting spirit immortal mist tea that I've kept in my collection for many years. TSK. The drifting spirit immortal mist tea is a precious treasure that only sprouts every 1,000 years. Drinking a bowl can be compared to consuming a medicinal pill prepared for a golden immortal. All of the seniors here were extremely fervent. Xianxi originally intended to bid his farewells and leave, yet he was grabbed a hold of and kept within the hall with the reason that they wanted to drink tea, discuss the Tao, and have a nice conversation with him. Such kindness was difficult to refuse, so Xianxi could only stay back. Actually, he was rather happy because everyone present here was a senior of the Pill Reserve or a great figure from the Shenyuan clan. So being able to obtain their unanimous recognition was absolutely a blessing that others were unable to obtain even if they put their lives on the line. Xianxi, the restoration method of the 9 profundity treasured cauldron, seems to be related to the energy of karmic luck. I wonder if you can explain the profundities of it. As the conversation flowed smoothly and merrily, a head instructor of the Pill Reserve was unable to refrain himself from asking this question. The other seniors of the Pill Reserve perked up their ears because to all of these supreme grandmasters in the Pill Tao and Talisman Tao, they were naturally most concerned about the restoration of the cauldron. Xianxi was mentally prepared for this since the beginning. He pretended to ponder deeply for a moment before he explained it ambiguously. The general idea was that he wasn't clearly aware of its profundities, and he only felt that restoring it in that way was the most logical and reasonable method. Moreover, he was rather fortunate to be able to succeed. All the seniors here were aged and experienced, so how could they be unable to perceive the meaning behind Xianxi's words? So they immediately stopped pursuing the matter. After all, this was Xianxi's own secret in the end. Since he was unwilling to reveal it, then it wasn't right for them to pester him about it. Not to mention that it was precisely because of Xianxi that they were able to restore the cauldron and even unexpectedly obtained a strand of karmic luck of the Heaven Tao. So it was impossible for them to arouse displeasure towards Xianxi in their hearts. It was even to the extent that the more Xianxi acted in this way, the more they felt that this young man was extraordinary. He seemed to possess various mysterious abilities, and it caused them to think even more highly of Xianxi. Swish! Suddenly, Shenyuan Pujuan flicked his sleeve, causing a small hill of precious treasures to appear on the ground. There were bottles of medicinal pills, various precious and rare immortal materials, and numerous immortal artifacts that flowed with brilliant glows. Instantly, the entire hall was enveloped in a dense glow of treasures, and it caused all the others present here to reveal a wisp of astonishment and extreme desire. Xianxi, you've helped me greatly this time, and you even allowed me to unexpectedly obtain a strand of karmic luck of the Heaven Tao. I gathered all of these treasures in the 3 dimensions during the past few years. Take anything you like. You can consider it as a gift from me. Shenyuan Pujuan pointed at the precious treasures that covered the ground and spoke with a smile. Xianxi was stunned as well. This was the collection of an existence at the half-step Immortal King realm. Every single treasure was so valuable that it was able to make countless people feel covetous towards it. Now, they were actually placed before him and to be selected at his will. Even with Xianxi's composure, he couldn't help but feel slightly dazed. Shenyuan Pujuan is really too kind. The others glanced at Xianxi with envious expressions as well when they heard this. Treasures that Shenyuan Pujuan attached such importance to were absolutely an extremely great fortune, and others weren't able to obtain a single one of them even if they kowtowed to Shenyuan Pujuan. Senior, said Xianxi. Before Xianxi could finish, Shenyuan Pujuan frowned and interrupted him. What? Little fellow, you're being courteous with me? I asked you to choose, so choose. If you still continue treating me as an outsider, then I'll take it as you are looking down on me, Shenyuan Pujuan. Xianxi was both moved and helpless when Shenyuan Pujuan spoke to such an extent, And he said in the end, "If you insist." Xianxia Pujuan's expression eased up, and he beamed as he said, "Good, that's how it should be. Compared to all these worldly possessions, I, Xianxia Pujuan, attach the most importance to ties of friendship. Little fellow, you have a good relationship with Axiu and even helped me greatly. More importantly, your disposition is to my liking. You're no different from a junior of mine, so there's no need to be courteous with me." All the others present here sighed emotionally in their hearts. Who said that Xianxia Pujuan is a straightforward madman? At the very least, these words were spoken very well. Not only did he give away some treasures, he obtained the good impression of a young student with boundless potential. His ability can be said to be outstanding to the extreme. She started choosing treasures. Needless to say, Xianxia Pujuan's pile of treasures were truly too rare and precious. Merely the numerous immortal artifacts didn't consist of a single one below the cosmic grade, and there was no lack of valiant grade immortal artifacts. As for medicinal pills, immortal materials, and other such treasures, it was the same. The sight of them caused Xianxia to be dazed, and there were too many treasures for his eyes to take in. Suddenly, Xianxia's eyes focused and descended onto an immortal material. It was a pair of dark black wings that were around the size of one's palm. It floated silently in midair while suffused with an icy cold and frightening aura. This is a nether crane's wings. The nether crane is a sacred beast in the netherworld, and it's comparable to a divine beast. I seized this pair of wings from a Grand Hall Master of the Blood River sect when I went to temper myself at the Blood River in the netherworld all those years ago. Take it if it sparks your interest. It can be refined into a pretty good flying immortal treasure. Xianxia Pujuan smiled as he guided. It really is a nether crane's wings. Xianxia's heart shook. An incomplete flame god fan still lay within the Buddha's pagoda. Presently, he'd only gathered the wings of a nether peacock king from the flaming peacock fan, the wings of a dark pheasant, and the wings of an azure phoenix. He still lacked the wings of a phoenix, suncrow, roc, and nether crane. Because the method to refine this immortal artifact was too difficult, and it was too hard to gather the required materials, it had always stayed within the Buddha's pagoda like a precious pearl covered in dust and was never utilized by him. He originally thought that he would probably be unable to utilize this treasure for his entire lifetime, yet never had he imagined that he was actually coincidentally encounter a pair of nether crane wings at this moment, so he was naturally slightly excited in his heart. The flame god fan. It was a treasure of the primeval times with divine might that shook the heavens. When it was refined successfully, a single fan of it would cause divine flames to blaze with flaming might that surged into the sky. It could incinerate a person into ashes with a flick, and it possessed the might to incinerate mountains and boil seas. It was a true primeval divine weapon. According to legend, a god possessed a flame god fan during the ancient times. He fought enemies from far and wide, and he incinerated countless experts. So, its might was absolutely extremely terrifying. These nether crane wings are indeed important to me, but she was slightly hesitant. This was an opportunity that was difficult to come by, so he naturally had to choose a treasure that was most useful to him. But if he chose the nether crane wings, they would probably be of no use in the near future. After all, besides the wings of a nether crane, the flame god fan still required the wings of a phoenix, suncrow, and roc. Moreover, amongst the flames required, besides the gold blaze flame, he still hadn't gathered the wood soul flame, darkwater flame, sun flame, and stalactite flame. Xianxia Pujuan seemed to have discerned something, and his dense brows raised as he said, "You wouldn't be intending to refine the flame god fan, right?" As soon as these words were spoken, all the others were shocked in their hearts as well. This precious treasure had an extraordinary background, and it was related to a figure from the primeval times that possessed remarkable divine might. The true method of refining it had already been lost in the annals of time. Xianxia didn't notice the strange expressions the others revealed, and he nodded as he said, "Yes, I still lack a few immortal materials now, so even if I know how to refine it, I can't make it out of nothing." Everyone was stunned. This little fellow actually really knows how to refine the flame god fan. "Then tell me what you lack." Shenyuan Pujuan didn't feel anything wrong with this and asked directly. Shi immediately spoke frankly about the immortal materials he lacked. The wings of a phoenix, sun crow, and rock? Shenyuan Pujuan was surprised and said, "So, you've already gathered the wings of an azure phoenix, dark pheasant, and nether peacock king?" Shi nodded. "I have a pair of sun crow wings here. I traded for it from a member of the primeval Sagittarius clan. Take it." A supreme talisman formation grandmaster of the Shenyuan clan spoke abruptly as he withdrew a pair of wings that seemed as if they were formed from burning golden flames. The golden flames flowed through it and emanated terrifying waves of heat. "I have a pair of rock wings. I originally intended to refine them into a flying treasure. But since you need it, then I'll give it to you." At practically the exact same time, Shenyuan Tong spoke as well and withdrew a pair of wings with a chaotic color and flowed with the misty brilliance of water. "Even though I don't have the wings of a divine flying beast, I have the wood soul flame. I have—" In the next moment, all the others spoke successively as they withdrew numerous precious treasures, causing Xianxia to be unable to help but be stunned on the spot. The wealth of these seniors that have lived for countless years really can't be underestimated. She hadn't imagined at all that something that felt difficult to the point of being practically impossible to complete was so easy before these seniors. First, Shenyuan Pujuan had produced the nether crane wings. Then a supreme talisman formation grandmaster of the Shenyuan clan produced a pair of suncrow wings before Shenyuan Tong gave him a pair of rock wings. On the other hand, the Pill Reserve's Dinshin Haoyan Vice Mo Linghai and many other seniors even casually provided him with the Wood Soul Flame, Darkwater Flame, Sun Flame, and Stalactite Flames that were top-rate and rare divine flames in the heavens and the earth. All of these treasures could be considered as existences that could only be chanced upon by luck. Yet now, they were right before him to be taken. It caused his face to freeze slightly while he felt it was slightly unreal. He was too surprised. The wealth of these seniors was too shocking. Heh! Disregarding everything else, the Pill Reserve has no lack of flames. Mo Linghai chuckled with a proud expression while the other great figures of the Pill Reserve smiled silently while vividly displaying the disposition of an expert. They were all supreme grandmasters in pill refinement, so they naturally didn't lack flames like the Wood Soul Flame and Darkwater Flame. After all, besides immortal materials, the most important thing when refining pills was the cauldron and flame. At this moment, when they saw Xianxia's stunned appearance, all of these seniors couldn't help but arouse a feeling of pride in their hearts. The limelight had been taken by Xianxia since the beginning, and they finally had the chance to see this little fellow subdued, so it was a truly comfortable feeling to them. "Unfortunately, you still lack a pair of phoenix wings." Shenyuan Pujuan spoke with a frown. "That thing is extremely rare, and it's a precious treasure of the divine beast, Phoenix. Moreover, it's one of the most important core materials to refine the flame god fan. I remember that the scripture reserves old Phoenix possesses this treasure, right?" said Shenyuan Tong. "Heh! Don't dream about it. That proud and ruthless old lady utterly despises others utilizing flying beasts as materials to refine treasures." Shenyuan Pujuan chuckled coldly, while his voice actually carried a trace of displeasure and a shred of indistinct fear. "That's a bit troublesome. Since the primeval times, the divine beast, Phoenix, was obliterated from the world. Its descendants are divided into two branches, the male Phoenix clan and female Phoenix clan. The male Phoenix clan resides outside the immortal dimensions, and it has been a very long time since they've made an appearance in the world, nor have they attempted to make any communication." Chun Haoyan frowned and said, "The female Phoenix clan is closely related to the immortal dimension instead. Unfortunately, according to my knowledge, only that old Phoenix possesses this treasure. Why don't I go meet with that old Phoenix, and I'll fight her if it doesn't work. I don't believe she won't hand over the Phoenix wings." Shenyuan Pujuan spoke with a murderous look on his face. She was shocked, and he was extremely moved when he saw all of these seniors were so concerned about this. At this moment, when he heard Shenyuan Pujuan intended to seize the treasure forcefully, he immediately and hurriedly said, "Thank you, seniors, for your great kindness. There's no rush, so it's fine to let me find a pair on my own." Xianxia was rather clearly aware that a divine beast like the phoenix was a supreme existence in the three dimensions, and long ago during the primeval times, it had vanished along with the numerous other gods. Presently, the descendants of the phoenix were divided into clans of males and females. So, it was utterly impossible for him to find a completely new phoenix. That old phoenix is in existence at the half-step immortal king realm that has lived for over 10,000 years. Can you really succeed? Xianxia Pujuan roared with laughter, and his voice carried a teasing tone. The others smiled as well. An existence like a true phoenix possessed extraordinary natural talent and a peerless bloodline. Its lifespan was extremely long, yet its path to advancement in cultivation was extremely difficult. Merely taking human form required no less than over 10,000 years. Of course, it was precisely because of this extraordinary natural talent that a true phoenix possessed that caused their combat strengths to far exceed immortal cultivators with the same cultivation. This was the difference in resources, reserves, and bloodlines. She couldn't care about all of this, and he said seriously, "I know a woman from the true Phoenix clan. Perhaps I'll be able to find out a great deal of information from her." He was speaking about Zhao Mingli. Of course, his relationship with Zhao Mingli wasn't good, and it was even to the extent that it was a relationship where they were competing with each other. The reason he spoke in this way was purely for the sake of giving all these seniors here an explanation so as to prevent them from looking for that old phoenix because of him. If that were to happen, then the kindness he received would be too great, and he was unable to bear such kindness. It wouldn't be that little girl called Zhao Mingli, right? Xianxia Pujuan's brows raised as he said, "That little girl's natural talent isn't bad, and she herself is outstanding. The rarest thing is that her bloodline is pure, and she inherited the secret technique that was part of the true phoenix's natural talent. Presently, she's already cultivating at the side of that old phoenix in the scripture reserve. If I'm not wrong, then she'll surely have a place in the inner court exam 2 years from now." Chun Haoyan sighed with emotion when Zhao Mingli was mentioned, and he said, "Yes, the new students this year are much more outstanding than those from the previous recruitments. They can be said to be a group studded with stars and filled with talented individuals. It won't be long before many new faces will be added to the ranks of the 6 blazing suns in the immortal dimension." When he spoke up to hear, he suddenly looked at Xianxia and said with surprise, "I remember that you advanced into the intermediate stage of the mysterious immortal realm during the 3rd round of the recruitment test. Only a little over 10 days have passed since then, yet you've actually broken through once more and advanced into the advanced stage of the mysterious immortal realm. Earlier, all of their minds were preoccupied by the 9 profundity treasured cauldron, and they'd actually overlooked Xianxia's cultivation. Now when they sized him up carefully, they really noticed that Xianxia was already at the advanced stage of the mysterious immortal realm. In a little over 10 days of time, he'd advanced from the intermediate stage to the advanced stage of the mysterious immortal realm. If they hadn't seen it with their own 2 eyes, they would be unable to believe it. Instantly, the gazes they shot at Xianxia had become slightly strange. They'd seen others that advanced swiftly, yet they'd never seen one that advanced so swiftly. Xianxia laughed bitterly in his heart. "I've been taken to be a freak again. However, great haste doesn't always bring success. Your foundation is probably not solid from advancing so quickly. The path of cultivation has to be taken step by step because only then would it be steady. Don't rush things because of your desire for achievement so as to avoid causing your future path towards the grand Tao to become more and more narrower." Xianxia Pujuan frowned and warned Xianxia. Xianxia said solemnly, "Senior is correct." Of course, he was unable to tell Xianxia Pujuan that his foundation was so solid and deep that it was an entire 100+ times greater than his peers. If this was still unsteady, then there was really no justice in the world. "You wouldn't have sped up your cultivation because you desire to participate in the inner court exam 2 years from now, right?" asked Chen Haoyan. Xianxia nodded. "Time waits for no one. I must strive for it." Even though he spoke these words calmly, they revealed a firm and stubborn feeling. Obviously, he'd decided that he would absolutely not change his decision. Everyone perceived this as well. The golden immortal realm isn't so easily attained. As it stands, you've already obtained the energy of the praise of the gods. No matter if it's your natural talent or combat strength, they've already obtained the acknowledgement of the third round of the recruitment test. However, breaking through to the golden immortal realm within 2 years of time still seems to be too hasty. At this moment, Xianxia seemed to have taken Xianxia to be a junior of his own, so everything he said revealed concern. The path of cultivation emphasizes on stability, so I recommend that you don't act so hastily. Xianxia nodded, and then he said with a smile, "When I met Senior Hua Jiankong earlier, he told me instead that if I desired to break through to the golden immortal realm, I could seek help from the 9 profundity treasured cauldron." As soon as these words were spoken, all the seniors present here were shocked in their hearts. Earlier, all of them were guessing exactly why Hua Jiankong, the dean's personal disciple, would come looking for Chen Shi, yet they never imagined that Hua Jiankong would actually guide Chen Shi in advancing into the golden immortal realm. This caused all of them to have an even deeper belief that the dean's gaze seemed to have never left Chen Shi since the end of the recruitment test. This little fellow is really filled with mystery. All of the others sighed with emotion in their hearts. The 9 profundity treasured cauldron? The pill reserves Dean, Chen Haoyan, paid close attention to the main point. Obviously, unlike the others, when he found out that Hua Jiankong actually asked Chen Shi to seek help from the 9 profundity treasured cauldron, he was slightly shocked and puzzled. Yes, the 9 profundity treasured cauldron. I happened to obtain a primordial azure lotus during the second round of the test, Chen Shi explained patiently. However, when they heard the words primordial azure lotus, all of their hearts shook once more while numerous thoughts filled their minds, and it caused them to pay utterly no attention to everything else Chen Shi said. After quite a long period of time, they stared at Chen Shi with strange gazes as if it was the first time that they'd met him. Chen Shi was slightly speechless. Isn't it just a primordial azure lotus? Why do they have such expressions? After that, a thought flashed in his mind, and he said, "Seniors, this primordial azure lotus was given to me by a senior called Meng Xinghe. He wouldn't be the dean of our academy, right?" Everyone was stunned when they heard this, and then they shook their heads and went silent in unison. They seemed as if they wouldn't utter a single word about it. Even Xianxia, whose style of doing things was the most straightforward, had opened his mouth before shutting it tightly in the end. Looks like Meng Xinghe is either the dean or another extraordinary existence in the academy. Chen Shi felt that it was slightly regrettable. However, he'd still perceived many things from all of their reactions. With the primordial azure lotus as the main ingredient, it can be refined into 9 aperture clarity divine pills. After consumption, one's chances of advancing into the golden immortal realm can be improved by 50%. Chen Haoyan pondered deeply before he spoke. However, refining this pill is slightly wasteful of such a precious treasure like the primordial azure lotus. This treasure is extremely important at the Saint Immortal realm, and it's indescribably extraordinary. In my opinion, you should keep it for now, and it's better to use it when you advance into the Saint Immortal realm. He was the dean of the pill reserve, and he himself was a supreme grandmaster that possessed extraordinary ability in pill refinement. So everything he said naturally carried enormous weight. If it was another person, that person could only dream of obtaining his guidance. Chen Shi naturally understood the pros and cons, and he went silent for a long time before he said in the end, "The Saint Immortal realm is too far away from me. Right now, my only desire is to smoothly advance into the golden immortal realm." He really couldn't wait any longer. Just as Zhou Zhili had said, the upheaval of the 3 dimensions was imminent. A single mistake would cause a string of mistakes that ultimately caused an enormous gap. The struggle to attain the Grand Tao emphasized on striving. No matter if it was for the sake of obtaining strength swiftly or for the sake of completing the responsibilities that he carried on his shoulders, Chen Shi would absolutely not allow himself to slow down in the slightest. "Give me the primordial azure lotus." Right at this moment, a melodious and tranquil voice drifted through the hall. The voice faintly carried a wisp of age and a trace of indolence. It seemed as if the owner of this voice had just awoken from countless years of slumber. The bodies of all the people present in the hall shook in unison, while their gazes simultaneously shot over towards the 9-profundity treasured cauldron that stood at the center of the hall. The hall was deathly silent, and only the melodious and tranquil voice that carried a trace of indolence was drifting through the air. The expressions of all the seniors here were complicated. It was an expression mostly filled with shock and mixed with some wonder, excitement, wild joy, and various other feelings. On the other hand, the gazes they shot at the 9-profundity treasured cauldron gradually carried a wisp of fervor. That voice actually came from the 9-profundity treasured cauldron. Doesn't this mean that after countless years in time, the cauldron's artifact spirit has appeared once more before all of us? When they thought up to here, even with Chen Haoyan's composure, his heart couldn't help but tremble. Amongst the people present, only Chen Shi was the calmest. Or perhaps it could be said that long ago when he was restoring the cauldron, he was already clearly aware that the artifact spirit of the cauldron had always been there. The reason was very simple. It was firstly from his understanding of the talisman formation diagrams within the cauldron, and secondly, it was because he was clearly aware that the talisman formation diagrams within the cauldron were related to the karmic luck of the Heaven Dao. If an artifact spirit wasn't present within it to hold down the fort, then the karmic luck that had accumulated for countless years within the cauldron would have effused out and vanished a long time ago. So when he heard the cauldron speak, Chen Shi immediately stood up and carefully took out an extremely verdant primordial azure lotus. He walked over to stand before the cauldron, and then he raised both his hands and handed it over. Swish! A misty and ethereal divine ray of light shot out from within the cauldron, and it swept away the primordial azure lotus in Chen Shi's hand and brought it back into the cauldron. When they saw this scene, all the seniors in the hall were even more certain that the artifact spirit of the cauldron had appeared, especially the seniors from the Pill Reserve. At this moment, they were unable to restrain the excitement in their hearts any longer, and they stood up swiftly with excited expressions that were filled with boundless fervor. This was the ultimate treasure of their Pill Reserve, a supreme pill cauldron that the primeval Tao Emperor had refined himself. If they considered it carefully, all of them had to address the cauldron as Ancestor. Bang! The cauldron shook and emanated boundless divine light. Talisman diagram after talisman diagram appeared from the body of the cauldron and reflected the sun, moon, landscape, plants, animals, and various other grand scenes. Jade vein blood ginseng, violet scale immortal root, immaculate ink soul dew, the shell of a 6-winged golden cicada. The tranquil voice that revealed a trace of indolence drifted once more through the hall, and it seemed to be talking to itself. However, when it entered the ears of all the supreme grandmasters in the Tao of Pill like Chen Haoyan and Mo Linghai, it caused their entire bodies to shake before they withdrew jade box after jade box without the slightest hesitation. Every single one of these boxes stored various precious immortal materials, and they were the immortal materials that the treasured cauldron's artifact spirit had just named. There was a total of 127 types. This amount caused Chen Haoyan and the others to be stunned. As far as they knew, refining 9 aperture clarity divine pills required an entire 136 types of immortal materials. But the cauldron had only asked for 127 types. Obviously, it was 9 types less. Had the 9-profundity treasured cauldron made a mistake? Of course not. As a peerless treasured cauldron that had refined countless pills and herbs, it was qualified enough to be the ancestor of the world of pill refinement. So how could it have made a mistake? Then it was they who were mistaken. Chen Haoyan and Mo Linghai swiftly glanced at each other, and both of them saw the shock in each other's eyes. The slightest change to the formula of a pill meant that a tremendous change would occur to the effect of the pill. 9 aperture clarity divine pills. Of what quality would the 9-profundity treasured cauldron be able to refine by doing this? At this moment, all the seniors from the Pill Reserve had extremely solemn expressions while they placed their entire concentration on the cauldron while carefully sensing every single change within it. At this moment, they'd utterly lost the air of a supreme grandmaster in the Tao of Pills, and they seemed like a group of obedient students who were listening to a respected and venerable senior explain the profundities of the Tao of Pills instead. All of them gave it their full attention and were meticulous. Everything in the world has a spirit, and so does a pill. Where does the spirit come from? The Tao. The Tao was shapeless, and the pill explained it. A pill is born from comprehending the secrets of the heavens. The profundities of pill refinement emphasize on the heart, to bear the essence of a myriad of spirits and be refined with a myriad of methods. Cultivating in pill refinement is cultivating the Tao, and the Tao is also the heart. The treasured cauldron glowed as rumbling tunes of the Tao resounded. The strands of tranquil and melodious sound drifted through the air, while carrying a unique aura that caused all the seniors of the pill reserve to be infatuated by it and forget themselves. They were sometimes pleasantly surprised, sometimes frowning, sometimes grinning, and sometimes dancing with joy. As the saying goes, the Tao carried a myriad of profundities, and no two comprehensions were alike. To explain it in a more mundane manner, this was like preaching. It was the same profound truth, yet when it entered the ears of different people, the profound truth they understood varied. The cauldron was refining and preaching at the same time. At this moment, the hall seemed like a lecture ground. However, the students had been changed to Chen Haoyan and the others instead. Xianyuan Pejuan and the others stood at the side. They didn't have many attainments in the Tao of Pills, but when they heard the profound truths of the Tao of Pills explained by the cauldron, they more or less obtained some comprehension. After all, once one arrived at their cultivations, one could attain the ability to be skilled in all techniques and recognize the whole through observation of a part. Even though this profound truth of the Tao of Pills was extremely obscure, it was one of the 3,000 grand Taos in the end, and all of them reached the same goal through different means. Amongst the people present, only Chun Shi seemed to be the most bored. Compared to the other seniors, his cultivation was bound to cause him to be unable to comprehend even more profound truths from the preaching of the cauldron. This caused him to be unable to help but feel regretful, but he couldn't be considered to be envious. The pill had the Tao of Pills. He had his own Tao as well. As it was said, each and everyone takes their own path on the 3,000 grand Taos. Conversely, Chun Shi was concerned about exactly what sort of shocking and miraculous effect the 9 aperture clarity divine pill refined personally by the 9 profundity treasured cauldron would process. He really looked forward to it. After an unknown period of time, the sounds emanated by the cauldron suddenly vanished, and it fell into deathly silence. Bang! After that, a deafening strand of rumbling arose from within the cauldron. Swish! A row of medicinal pills suffused with divine radiance surged out from within like tidewater. Instantly, the entire hall was suffused with a medicinal fragrance that seeped into the depths of one's marrow, and it seemed as if it was even capable of intoxicating one's soul. These medicinal pills were crystalline and translucent. They were the size of longans with 9 apertures on them. Every single aperture seemed as if it was nurturing a living being, and it inhaled and exhaled divine radiance while emanating extremely thick and refreshing medicinal strength. As soon as it flew into the sky, it started to flutter about as if it possessed intelligence, and it actually intended to leave the hall. Retrieve. When he saw this, the pill reserve's Dean, Chun Haoyan's expression turned cold, and he withdrew a jade bottle before forming profound seals with his hand. He swiftly sealed up all the medicinal pills before placing them into the jade bottle. After he finished doing all of this, Chun Haoyan held the pill bottle with both hands before bowing towards the cauldron as he said, "Thank you, senior, for your kindness." The other seniors from the pill reserve bowed in unison as well, and they had since expressions and seemed to be filled with heartfelt admiration. As is the cycle of karma, all of you have helped me, so I helped all of you. There's no kindness to speak of here. If all of you want to thank someone, then thank that young man. The cauldron spoke with a voice that was tranquil and melodious as well, and the indolence within its voice carried a strand of indescribable age. After it finished speaking these words, it didn't make another sound and seemed to have fallen once more into endless silence. It took a very long time for everyone to return to their senses after witnessing this, and it was impossible for them to conceal their shock and emotion. The artifact spirit of the treasured cauldron had awoken, helped Chun Shi refine 9 aperture clarity divine pills, and explained the profundities of the Tao of Pills at the same time. It caused them to obtain great benefits as well. All of this was like a fortune that could only be chanced upon by luck, yet it had fallen right onto them, and it caused all of them to have no choice but to sigh endlessly with emotion. Yes, now that I think of it, it really is this young man, Xianxia, who should be thanked. Without him, how could they have possibly restored the cauldron? How could they have obtained the reward of the karmic luck of the heaven Tao? How could they have seen the artifact spirit of the cauldron and even obtained its guidance in the Tao of pills? If these fortuitous encounters were like numerous pearls, then Xianxia was like the string that strung up these pearls, and it was utterly impossible for them to obtain an extraordinary fortune without him. So, in the next moment, the gazes of all these seniors descended onto Xianxia in unison, and their gazes blazed while their smiles were as amiable could be. At this moment, if Xianxia made any request, then they would probably agree without the slightest hesitation. Even Shenyuan Pujuan and the other seniors of the Shenyuan clan smiled endlessly as well, while their opinion of Xianxia rose even higher. This young man's actions are always so unexpected. But in the end, Xianxia fled with the bottle of 9 aperture clarity divine pills. It couldn't be helped. These seniors were too fervent, and he suspected that he would be made to stay by force and be cared for like a precious child if he didn't leave now. This sort of excessive fervor really caused him to experience being overwhelmed by sudden favor for the first time. Tell the clansmen of our Shenyuan clan in the academy that they should treat Xianxia like a member of our clan in the future. No, they should be even more respectful to him. After Xianxia left, Shenyuan Pujuan and the other members of the Shenyuan clan left successively. But when they left, Shenyuan Pujuan had made an important decision. Shenyuan Tong didn't think anything was wrong with this decision when they heard it, and all of them nodded in support. At such a young age, Xianxia didn't just possess extraordinary natural talent. He himself seemed to carry numerous secrets. Moreover, Xianxia had successively obtained the recognition of Hua Jiankong and all the seniors of the Pill Reserve. Most importantly, he'd helped the Shenyuan clan greatly. So, under these circumstances, their Shenyuan clan naturally had to make a clear stand and display its good intentions and support to Xianxia. In the spacious hall, only the seniors of the Pill Reserve remained. Chen Haoyan was silent for a short moment before he let out a heartfelt emotional sign. This Xianxia is extraordinary. Earlier, I was still wondering why the dean didn't allow the other old fellows to take Xianxia as their personal disciples. Now I finally understand. The dean's gaze has never left Xianxia. Perhaps the dean did this because he has other plans for Xianxia. The other seniors of the Pill Reserve deeply agreed. But no matter what, we owe Xianxia a great favor, and he even obtained the acknowledgement of the 9 profundity treasured cauldron. If he needs anything from our Pill Reserve in the future, then we can't remain indifferent. Chen Haoyan had a serious expression as he spoke in a low voice. Of course. The others nodded successively. Chen Haoyan couldn't help but grin when he saw this, and his gaze was deep as he muttered with emotion. The upheaval of the 3 dimensions is imminent. Heroes will come forth in large numbers while crowds of stars will dazzle resplendently in the immortal dimension. Yet only a small group of people amongst them will be able to lead the powerful current of the times. He didn't mention the name of anyone in his words. But at this moment, Xianxia's figure simultaneously floated into appearance within the minds of all the seniors present here.